So we are live just about an hour early. So sorry about that, everybody who maybe missed the beginning. That's totally my fault, but we're here. So welcome to Radiant Creators. Thank you, Tino von Struckmann, for being on again on this Sunday. And there's nothing better to talk about on a Sunday than Nazis, I think.
No.
I mean,
Well, why in the wings? I hear Joseph Farrell going like, yes.
He's like,
I
yes.
mean, there's nothing like Nazis for the breakfast for the breakfast table. It's
No.
for those who have breakfast and those who not those who are at work. But yes, it always it's funny. Whenever you, as we all do, we create historical documentaries, and I always lament a little bit at. I try very hard when I do a documentary to put in the poster a depiction of what I'm talking about. If it's a fort or a tunnel or a person, that'll be the picture, and I'll actually mention that in the headline. This is what I'm talking about, and then you see a lot of people who create the clickbait. Because if you insert the word Nazi or Hitler or secret, people are going to look. And then you open up and find out, well, they're talking about a bunker by the water. It doesn't have anything to do with it. But I guess the selling points are there. It's just no matter how much you want to twist and turn it, you say Nazi and secret. It just.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Goebbels couldn't have written it better than that.
I'm sure he probably like smiles in his grave every time somebody clicks on a secret Nazi video.
I mean, at least Hitler's not getting royalties from the sales of his likeness anymore. Probably.
Yeah, as far as we
probably
know.
bought the copyrights to his photos and making money on them or something.
Yeah, maybe that money ran out. I mean, they did go after Disney after all. So anyway. But with that said, so thanks for being on. And so the whole gist of this is that I wanted to chat with Tino about Nazis, because looking at the current world situation, the word pretty much Nazi right now is defined in the Urban Dictionary as anyone that disagrees with you. Pretty much that's what a Nazi is. But that's not really accurate. So the idea was, what was a Nazi in, of course, World War II era? There could be a definition of that we could have fun with. What would that have been? Then, of course, the reality that the Nazis did go underground right around 1944 with that meeting with Bormann. And of course, did they really go that far underground? As time progresses, I think they just ducked. I don't think they went underground at all. And of course, now we have the conflict that everybody is aware of. The Ukrainian conflict. And that's kind of what brings this whole topic up, is because, if you look at Russia's definition of what they're doing, it's a special operation for demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. And that's another topic. It's just, the Azov battalion, the Azov militia, I guess you could say, and such, are these guys really Nazis or not? That's a topic there. And then, of course, basically to round it all off, is just, is the Nazi International still alive today? So that's just kind of the loose gist of all this, because I think it's a valuable topic at this time, because one of the things about not knowing history is that you start believing everybody's a Nazi except Nazis. And so we need to kind of focus this definition a little bit, and then look at Russia and the Ukrainian conflict, and are there Nazis involved at all here, or are these just kind of LARPers that like to piss off the Russians by wearing World War II insignia? So we could start with just, thanks for being here, Tino, but also,
there's always Nazis involved somewhere. I mean,
or it wouldn't be any fun.
There's Nazis somewhere. It's good for publicity. It sells magazine covers, though there has to be Nazis somewhere. Well, okay, I'll climb up on my soapbox and explain something that I may not have that you may have noticed from those of you who watched any of my documentaries, is that I practically never used the term Nazi, because, there really, during World War II, there really wasn't such a thing. Mm-hmm. Nazi, the term is, I'm surprised. Some of you may be surprised to hear, but the term Nazi is a derogatory term. to describe the National Socialist leadership. It's not supposed to be seen as a positive thing. Uh, so the good Nazi would be an oxymoron. Um, and, I don't know. I could just hear Joseph in the back of my mind going off on that one. But the term Nazi was not used by the Germans in Germany or occupied territories. It was not used by the National Socialist leadership. It was a term that really didn't spring up until after the war, specifically to denote the National Socialists, the party members. And that's why I never use it, because when you talk about it's so predominant. You see it in every documentary. They refer to everybody, the Nazis this, the Nazis that, the Nazis did this. And I go, well, we can at least, can we then go back to Nazi is not even the synonym of National Socialist, which was the name of the party, NSDAP. It wasn't even that. It was it was a compilation of other words, things, lazy farmer and something else in German. That was, so the term Nazi was a derogatory term that had nothing to do with the National Socialists. Just giving you some really boring background information here. So when we talk about the leadership of Germany, and they say, oh well, the Nazis did this, and I said, well, can we then at least go back to was he a party member? Was this person in question a National Socialist, or was he not? Was he a German general, not a party member? Then I would find it hard pressed calling him a Nazi. But since the war, the term Nazi has just been thrown out at all Germans. And now, like you said, pretty much anybody who is not on a mainstream leftist public opinion is basically labeled as a Nazi, which means just like their term racist has been thrown away around at everybody who doesn't agree with something that have nothing to do with race. So now it's become a terminology that really doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And it's just the synonymous term for the boogeyman of the day. And for the Russians to use the term, we're hunting Nazis. Well, there's been a lot of events that happened since the end of the war, and like you said, this is where instinctively I really want to go, well, the SS, you can say they were National Socialists because most of them, or a lot of them, were party members. They certainly believed in the National Socialist ideal. The National Socialist ideal of Germany during the war was it was an anti-Semitic platform, and certainly the Jews of Germany and the occupied territories were made to feel that they were most certainly not welcome and persecuted and put in camps. There's no doubts about that. They were killed and forced to be worked to death. There's no doubt about that. That you can say that the National Socialist ideology is also a patriotic ideology. It is very much it was about greater Germany. It was about Germany being, in the mind, a better country and a better people and better than everybody else. But it was a very, unlike communism, which sought to spread. Communism is by default not a one country. Like Goebbels, he always thought highly of as he called it, the great light of the East, of the great socialist experiment that was Russia after the Russian Revolution, of the Russian communists, because he saw them as a Russian entity for Russia. But the moment you look at communism, it's not bound to a country like National Socialism was. It seeks to spread. It becomes a worldwide ideology. But when you look at National Socialism, it's usually bound to a country, which is now why anybody who has a patriotic sentiment in any country, which I don't see there's anything wrong with patriotism, no matter where you're from. If you're from Ukraine or Norway or Denmark or Africa or England, you should be proud of your country because that is your mother country, is where you're from when you were born. You should be proud of that heritage. But now anyone who is now you use the nationalist. Now you went from patriot to nationalist, and now nationalist. Now you're a Nazi,
Yeah.
which is completely warped. It's a very very clever propaganda stunt that you play on words. But what it now has resulted in that everyone who's patriotic in any country can now be labeled as a Nazi because they like their country. The Ukrainians love their country. They're fighting for the borders. There's a whole bunch of Americans here who love our country. There's people all over the world who love their country, who love the heritage and their food and their culture and where they came from and their ancestors. These ideologies that were also, of course, that is what the Germans built the National Socialism on. And that was the one thing that Goebbels had not initially in the 20s understood, because he thought he wanted to swing more to the socialists. And since I bring Goebbels up because he was a master of propaganda, he was exceptionally good and adept at presenting things and twisting them and turning them for a propaganda that came out in his favor. And his techniques, you see them on TV every day today in most countries. I doubt there's any savvy politician or political marketing director should have read up on what Goebbels did, because it worked. And the communists today, or the socialists, are just slightly better at it than anybody else. So when we talk about the current crisis today, or the next crisis, or the crisis before, always be wary of what you see on TV, on the news, and the media. Always ask critical questions and think independent thoughts, because you have to subtract a little bit and you have to dig a little deeper to find out what's really going on the ground. And when we'll just skip a big section, and when we go to the Azov battalion, well, it doesn't. Now we can say, well, what is true and what is not true? What are Russia claiming? And what are the Azov themselves claiming? What are the Ukrainians claiming? And what do you see on TV? What are all the talking points? And then we can take away and say, well, none of that, if we just go by the assumption that none of that matters, and let's just look at what's what, it doesn't help very much against the Azov when you see them waving swastika flags around. Mm-hmm. It doesn't help their public image. However, the Nazis, or the National Socialists that went underground in 1945 and re-emerged very nicely a few years later, many of them in Adenauer's cabinet, and continued the construct of the great European Union and the EU. And let's not forget that Hallstein, the very first general secretary of the EU, he was an advisor to Heinrich Himmler. And don't get on my case for this, because I had argument with various people of political interest on some side that really doesn't like that fact. Well, look it up. There are plenty of photos. There's plenty of documentation. Don't take my word for it because I'm sitting here saying it. Look it up. Look up what I'm saying. Look at what Hallstein he did during the war, and look at what a lot of people in Adenauer's cabinet did during the war, and then how they became nicely revamped, turned up into Adenauer's cabinet. And let's not forget the intelligence chiefs and many others. Hjalmar Schacht was what became involved. Everyone that was involved in the Third Reich, most of them ended up in politics. The Gestapo took off their Gestapo uniform and put on a suit and went back to police work. Everybody went back to business. But Hallstein, he was still the first general secretary of the EEC. And as an economic union, as a trade union, the concept, the idea is good. But where it has then taken it, you can't say that the European Union is an anti-Semitic National Socialist organization, however. So you can't say that the National Socialist ideals and concept of Germany during the war, which was very much using anti-Semitics way before they were ever they went on. Anti-Semitism has existed for as long as Judaism, and it's been used by a lot of people to serve their propaganda needs. You got to blame somebody in order to win office. That's pretty much the way it is today. That's the way it was 1,000 years ago. That's the way it was in Germany. And I see it sort of. Goebbels most certainly became an anti-Semite during the 20s, and he wasn't born that way. I don't think his father had Jewish friends. I don't think it was something nothing particularly happened. You could say that what was always claimed, that Hitler's mother was Jewish, and she died, and that's where his anti-Semitism began. I don't think that's true. I think that both Hitler and Goebbels, to a certain degree, saw the Jews of Germany as a tool in order to, let's blame these guys and win some elections. Because after the election was won, there's not that much initiative on the part of for instance, Hitler to go after the Jews as such. His underlings most certainly then did and took up that torch, but it wasn't that like it was a driving force after the election victory. And you can't say that after the war, anti-Semitism most certainly was not in a high demand, especially in lieu of what happened. So you can now say the post-World War II Nazi, if you want to use that term, is not really rooted in anti-Semitism. So, but it can still be rooted in nationalism. And that's one of the things you may look at in the Ukraine, where you have certainly the Azov Battalion is a nationalist, patriotic bunch of. It started as a militia that was then later incorporated into the Ukrainian armed forces, and they have a Jewish prime minister who just gave them the highest decoration for their service. So, and I think that's kind of the most telling thing, that if these were rapid anti-Semite kind of Nazis, well, then the prime minister probably wouldn't have brought them in under the military umbrella and decorated them. So you have now a different evolution of National Socialism, which have shed the Semitism and focused more on the patriotism. And when I talked I just talked to my interpreter out there because I wanted to make sure I didn't get it all wrong. I mean, this is a very hard fighting unit, and they have outdone themselves in valor and heroism. They fight hard. They are most certainly very, very patriotic of their country, and you can't doubt that. But so was the SS. So is the U.S. Marine Corps that you saw a couple of years ago pose with an SS flag in Afghanistan. Are they a bunch of Nazis? No, probably not. But what has been one of the interesting things, and which is what makes World War II history so interesting, is I love to talk about. I found some great, amazing forts and things, and I love to talk about the Franco-Prussian War, and everybody wants to talk about the Nazis. They want to talk about the SS. They want to talk about the bad guys who fought out at the front. Because, I mean, no matter how you twist and turn it, the Waffen-SS was an incredible, potent fighting force. They were dedicated and ruthless, and they were well trained. But they were also, for the most part, at least in the initial stages, and as Himmler had envisioned, they were really well educated. Most of the SS had higher degrees, and many of them had doctorates. These were not as a dumb bunch of hooligans. They were very intelligent and educated group of people who fought very, very hard on the front line, and most certainly earned the respect of everybody. Everyone knew that if an army unit was in trouble, if they had an SS unit on their flank, they're probably going to be okay. So that kind of, they have proved themselves in battle. So all of their symbols have since become a good, if you excuse it, it's become sort of a good luck charm for a lot of military units today. And that is kind of the best way I can explain it, especially to people who haven't been in the military, who just see the symbols and think, oh my God, they're a bunch of Nazis. See, now you have me do it. But I knew Danish tankers who had no Nazi sympathies whatsoever had the death's head on their berets. And I've seen tankers with pictures of Michael Wittmann in their tank. It is a little bit, and the symbolism, I get it. It's not the most fortunate or propaganda point of view, because you're still running around with a little SS or a Sigrun or Death's Head and a swastika, and like, publicity is not, they're not going to like this. But I think from the soldier's point of view, there is still this stigma that these guys won battles. They were just fearsome warriors. And where did they get their symbolism? Mm-hmm. Well, they go back to the Vikings, because that's where the SS got their symbolism, back to the runes. And who were the Vikings? They were these fierce fighting warriors who traveled around the world and spread fear and intimidation and invaded everywhere, from landed on the shores of France and England and to America. So, of course, the SS adopted the Sig runes, which had also something to do, of course, with Himmler's Germanic visions. But those are still the ones that are coming back. Those symbols are still the ones coming back in battle. And for frontline soldiers, well, that's kind of what you want. You want to call upon the good graces of Odin and of the warrior gods, of the ancient battles won under these banners. And I think that is the main driving force behind why you see National Socialist or SS, let's face it, you see SS symbols traveling with warriors and soldiers today, because that's what they're trying to, they want to, I was like, it's hard to explain to people who haven't, if you talk to frontline soldiers, they want to win and want to kick ass and want to come home. And that's why a lot of those symbols have been traveling with them over time. And I was writing my friend, and I said, well, he was going, well, they have the Azov battalion, they had the and if you want to pull it up, I can open up for those who may not.
Sure, yeah. If you want to share it,
I will share it.
And then add to stream.
So here you have. This is the original Azov battalion, and ta-da! Open up. There you go.
Yes.
So
yeah.
It's
well, the background there. That's the Black Sun, right? The furthest background is that.
That's the Black Sun, and this is pretty much the second SS Panzer. And here's the Blue Sea, because Azov is, of course, named after the Azov Sea. So, from what I understand, is they have removed the Black Sun. All right, fine. Well, I'm not gonna. But that is their original insignia, and this is the second SS Panzer. So, it's okay. They cut it and they turned it like 25 degrees or so. Yeah, it's kind of hard to run from. They kind of like side by side there. You see them. It is pretty close, and certainly is an argument. And also when you then see with their helmets, and I know, of course, the German TV, they were the first ones to pick up on that, because that they had, some of them had SS engraved on their helmets, or the swastikas. And it would probably be fair to say that there most certainly are people in the units and that have extreme right-wing views, or have leanings that are closer to the National Socialists. But again, they're still serving a Jewish prime minister who decorated them. And right now, as I just heard back from Igor, so they're in Mariupol. These guys are protecting Russian soldiers, and they're fighting for the lives of Russian civilians and Jewish civilians in Mariupol. So there could most certainly be Nazis in the organization, and they most certainly use the rhetoric, because the rhetoric hasn't changed no matter who's using it. It's sort of the same. But the anti-Semitic part of that ideology does not seem to have translated over. They also have Muslims in the Azov. They have Jewish soldiers in the Azov, from what I understand. And I don't see. I don't. It's one of those things. I would like to be on the ground, and if you sit down with 100 soldiers from any country, including Russia, because I most certainly have seen, not recently, but a decade ago, you'd see people march under a swastika flag in Russia. You have a neo-Nazi ideology that is growing everywhere. And the interesting thing is, when the extreme right grows, you can go back to see, well, a lot of times that has been fueled by, and it's like history is like a pendulum. When it swings really hard left, it will eventually fuel the right, and then it'll swing back the other way. So instead of trying to fight for balance in the middle, where we could all sort of coexist, you will always have the battle between left and right. You'll have the battle between nationalists and communists, and which is something that a real thing that happened. Is you have, again, communism versus nationalism. Communism wants to, it's the world, one world order. Most certainly, is a socialist ideal because it's one world. Whereas if you're a nationalist, if you're a patriot, you want to preserve your borders, which is inherent. And when the communists in the 20s started to proclaim, like the communist state of Bavaria, they wanted a merger with the Soviet Union. When you see the influence during the Cold War of the communists on the various green parties around the world, they want this one world order because it will have to be. If you had one entity running the world, mind you, is a pretty damn big place. If you want to eradicate borders and national sympathies and patriotism from all the individual countries, the only way to have a one world order is a borderline communist dictatorship, because it would have to be a dictatorship, whether run by a person or by an entity or by a governing body like Duma comes up as a terminology here. It would be the only way. You would have to do it by oppression. Like you see oppression of information, of communication, which is almost exclusively done by one side of the spectrum. And what happens, and what they've seen, you see it in Austria and Germany and France, everywhere that you have a crackdown on any kind of freedom of speech that involves, you don't have to be a right wing. If I say right wing, we're thinking that then all of a sudden your mindset, just because what you've been conditioned to, you go back to, them are the neo-Nazis and skinheads. Just because you're not in the center or not left of center, patriotism, you're a Nazi, you're a skinhead, I think that has been a deliberate misdepiction, because in that case, I know a lot of Jewish Nazis, which seems to be a little weird. You can't just paint anybody who loved their country as a Nazi, as has been done for the past many, many years. And unless you fall in line with an imposed public opinion, well, now it seems that what the Nazis did, the actual National Socialists, what Goebbels did, was most certainly he was smart. He took command over all of the media in Germany. Hitler started buying newspapers from the 20s. So they had control over the media, over the film, over the Wochenschau, over the radio. The radio was the internet at the time. And if you control information, you control public opinion. That is how simple it is. So if you see anything you see on what now we just call it mainstream information, or mainstream media, mainstream internet, mainstream websites, which is always falls in line with the same opinion. And usually any kind of questioning that will be blurted out. So what has now happened is they have taken one from Goebbels' playbook, where he wouldn't allow any discourse. I mean, of course, he's not gonna go out and do radio shows and have the leading communists of Germany 1930 come on the radio and have a debate. you make sure that Himmler would lock them up, because we can't have that sort of thing going on. Because national Nazi Germany was not a free speech kind of place. And I suppose we can say we don't really have a free speech kind of place anymore, because National Socialism, well, if you take the national or with or without, it's still socialism, and it's still borderlining on a communist ideology that cannot have, or it can't live with freedom of speech. And you have all these little ladies, housewives, families, nice, normal, nice people that have nothing to do with a national socialist or racist agenda or anti-Semitic agenda, that are being labeled as such, and they are resenting it, because they're all being painted in a corner with a very small group of people that they have nothing to do with. Like I've always said, if you take the skinheads, the neo-Nazis of today, have nothing to do. They have nothing in common with the SS of yesteryear. For the most part of the ones, I don't think I know any, but from what I can see, they don't seem to have massive college degrees. Okay, which these days may not necessarily be a bad thing, but never mind.
That's true. Well, it's like Churchill said, I believe it was, there's no public opinion, there's only published opinion.
There you go.
Yeah. So once you've carpet bombed the mainstream media, basically like you own it, well then, that's a difference between, that is a big difference between, you could say, World War II era and now, is that, there certainly still is mainstream media, and it's probably it's just as vicious as anything that Goebbels ever put out, I think, if not worse. They've gotten better at it. But there is I don't like using the word alternative media. There's just a lot of media. We have kind of a global communication right now that we didn't have before. I mean, really, everybody with a cell phone doing video is now a media platform. And so that's a big difference. So I think that kind of screws up the mainstream media ideal a little bit, because I think CNN just did a CNN Plus, they called it, like a streaming service. I don't understand exactly what it was, but
I fell asleep, and when I woke up, it was gone.
It was gone. Yeah, it died in less than a month, and now people are crying about it, saying it's just so mean that that whatever. I guess nationalists attacked it. Well,
people see it.
It's like I mean, yeah. Well, and now we have a real extreme where there is, of course, the nationalists. You can say socialists. But really, it seems like today we have such an extreme where it's like globalist is what I would call it, kind of like the neo-globalist, like the neo-socialist globalist, who's kind of doing the whole Klaus Schwab thing.
Yes.
Who also kind of, you look at like Klaus Schwab's little henchmen, anybody who thinks any of like Hitler's, friends were nasty, I'm like, you gotta look around today. Like, I mean, Himmler and Goebbels and such, they weren't that bad compared to Harari, like Klaus Schwab's little henchman who wrote *Sapiens*, which is the biggest bunch of shit I've ever read in my life. Basically, he's like, we know nothing about history, so I'm just going to say that all of history, let's just toss it out and say it's been a struggle for fascist globalism. And people read that crap, and I read it. I couldn't get through it. I was like, I had enough. But then this guy's saying that now humans are not, there is no God, there's no divinity, there's no mystery any longer. You're just hackable animals. So you'll own nothing. You'll be hacked as a biological computer and you'll like it. So, I mean, now it's like the stakes it's the funniest thing where, really, it is an interesting debate, is Azov, are these guys Nazis, or, and we can go a little bit deeper into that, of course, but it's like the high level globalist ideals right now of what I would call socialism, like the neo-globalist socialism, that crap is way more horrifying than anything the Nazis came out with, or like the National Socialists did in World War II. I mean, their vision was not quite so extreme. It's somewhat localized.
Hitler wanted to take over Europe for Germany. The communist socialists, they want to take over the world for them. So, and that's the interesting thing is, okay, there was most certainly also top leadership of the National Socialists that enriched themselves. Interestingly enough, Rudolf Hess was not one of them. He only had a little apartment. And even Himmler paid for his own house, paid for his own things. So it wasn't like all of them. But you look at the communism, you look at the Duma, you have the little percent during communism. You have the 1% who has everything and everyone else who has nothing. So you have the top leadership of a communist dictatorship who has everything, where they're not trying to take over the world to make everybody equal and take care of everyone and give us all flying unicorns and zero emission energy and all that horse dung. They're taking it over because they want power, and that's what any dictatorship want. They want power for themselves. They don't want anybody to ask questions about it, and they have a very efficient machinery of, like you said, there's so many media outlets, there's so much, but there really isn't. Yes, everybody with a cell phone can broadcast, and you can then say something that is not in the interest of whoever provides your platform, and then they'll shut you down. So you have, 90% of the big media is owned by 12 entities. So you really don't have a whole lot of that. That's why sometimes you find the real news in small independent published newspapers. You have independently published books. Because, and I guess that's one of the reasons why they want to get rid of books and do everything on computer or digital, because everything that's okay for us to talk about today, well, the way things are going in 2 years, that will be considered offensive or something else. So we have to rewrite the text. And if you have everything on a digital platform, you can just go in and tweak it. And, now we also need bathrooms for Martians or whatever the next thing is going to be. I saw the sad meme that lately that said, "I support the next thing."
Yes.
Because there's always a next thing, and they're always kept in a state of uproar and confusion and fear, because always something coming to get you. Like during the Cold War, it was fairly easy to keep people going. People keep going because you always had to warn about the Russians. And the Russians may not have been as scary back then as we were told, because a lot of the intelligence of what the Russians had came from the German intelligence that was also working for Fremdesheeres Ost. So the head of the intelligence for Adenauer's cabinet, who was put in place by the CIA, he was also one of the former Reich intelligence service, Reinhard Gehlen. So maybe the Russians weren't that scary back then, but we need a boogeyman. Everybody needs to blame somebody else. The Russians, in their internal propaganda, the East Bloc, they were blaming us that we were eating our babies and doing whatever they said we were doing, and we were saying the same thing about them. So every time you see these news stories that meant to keep you fearful, and I know people who literally had heart attacks because they watched the news constantly, and they were so agitated and so angry and so much in an uproar. And I keep telling them, stop. First of all, stop watching the news. Certainly stop watching the news every day. Be very selective with what you watch. I actually like watching Mark Steyn because he delivers bad news with a sense of humor. But he's also very honest about the problems, which is why you don't see him on mainstream American radio and television anymore. Because even the media on the right doesn't like to talk about the fact that we really have some very serious problems in this country. And we really need to start thinking about what kind of world we want to live in. But we're not thinking about that. We're thinking about fixing the next thing that happens in 15 minutes. We're going to be told that someone is going to destroy the planet, or Donald Trump clubbed a frog at the golf course, or something completely irrelevant, where we all need to take a step back from it all and remember, just take a baseline. Fire is hot. Lifting heavy objects may hurt your back. It's common sense. Just take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And whenever you hear all these meant to scare bits and pieces, well, think further. just like I haven't made up my mind about this whole Ukraine thing yet, because there's something to me that just feels off about why this happened now. Why did Putin do this now? Uh, what does it mean globally? What will come of it? I could see something positive come out of this, in a sense that it will wake up from complacency a whole lot of Western leaders to the fact that they need to stop preaching about flying unicorns and start thinking about pragmatically how to actually run their country, in a sense that their country can sustain themselves in a time of crisis. And the most asinine thing is you have the Green Party in Germany that keeps shutting down nuclear power plants, which is by far and away the cleanest and safest means of producing enough electricity. Instead, they're just shutting everything down, depending on Russian oil. Great idea that was. And we see a little bit of the same here. You see it in England, you see it everywhere. But you see an ideology that will dismantle everything the Western civilized world have been built on. Which is, we are committing suicide in so many different ways in the Western countries, because and most people are not seeing it because they're too busy being distracted by things that generally does not matter. So we really need to take a look at what actually matters for you, what matters in the bigger picture to you and your family, and how can you remember, propaganda is only as good as people watch it. So you say, well, you have these main 5-6 networks that constantly or you have all this. Well, propaganda wouldn't matter if no one watched it, right?
Or and if they were a little, I don't want to say smarter. That's not really fair to put it that way, but you could. But also, one thing that happened. This is something I think for America specifically that I believe. I think you could say it started at the end of World War II, at the 50s. You can see it in the 60s and 70s, but I think it really accelerated through the 80s and 90s, and definitely, since 2000 is. Yeah. And I love America. I mean, I'm American AF, right? So I am. I'm not giving my country undue, scorn here, but at some point we traded American exceptionalism, that term people use now. It just sounds weird. We traded being something great, self-reliance, hope, being that shining city on the hill. Something went wrong. We traded American exceptionalism as being something real and great. For really, we traded that for just American exceptionalism being the right to be stupid.
Yes, that's a thing.
And the right to not be worldly, don't travel, have no idea, look down on the rest of the world. Just basically, we won. We have complete supremacy, and I can kind of sit here in the trailer park and toss beer bottles out my window and make the dumpster. And I love America, but I truly think that's one of our issues is that we trade exceptionalism changed from true exceptionalism, being the best, being the greatest, to just we have the right to be complacent and stupid because that could just be the fact that you have no natural. There's that great movie, isn't really the greatest movie, but Idiocracy. And part of the premise for that movie was that ultimately, if you have no predators, if there's no challenges, eventually, that movie becomes reality. The only thing is that movie was charming and funny. The real thing is what we're going through right now, and it's not quite so pretty.
But I think you're right. I think that the key here is we're not demanding anything from anyone of the next generation. I worked my ass off my whole life to have a little bit, and then to lose it because somebody speculated in the housing market a decade ago. And I work my ass off every day to build something back again, because that's what you do. You work hard, you save up money, you buy the things you want. But no, the new world is you buy everything on credit, and you have credit forgiven. How many ads do you see about, well, you can just have your debt forgiven. You don't have to pay back your credit card debt. I mean, what kind of signal is that to send? It's just asinine. But it all started, I mean, after the Second World War, a whole lot of young men came back, and young women, don't get me wrong, but most on the fighting front, they were pretty young men. They came back from war with having seen hardship, having experienced fighting for civilization, for their lives, for their friends. They've seen things in the very worst and the very best of humanity. And so that's exactly what that's what I'm going to go to. I'm coming to the schools right now. And a lot of these guys who came back are the ones who were put in schools as superintendents and teachers because they had a life experience. And maybe they've been tough teachers. I mean, for those who had a Marine Corps instructor as a school teacher in grammar school, good for you. You probably remember what he taught you.
Yeah.
And now, of course, they eventually got old and they retired. And then all the teachers, I don't know all the teachers, but a lot of the teachers, our education institutes were taken over by, it's not a secret that most of the teachers have a very left-leaning sentiment. That you can't really argue that, or say progressive. But even the terminology progressive has changed over the past 10 years. The term liberals have changed over the past 10, 20 years. Democrats of 20 years ago are not the Democrats of today. Everything changes. So it's hard. So when I use the term as it was seen back then. Because today it means something else, and in a couple of years it will mean something entirely different. Which is why we can go back and say, oh, whatever we said 10 years ago, now that's offensive. You get blocked. Although it was funny 10 years ago. People have been told to change. They are being conditioned starting in schools. It's not about learning. It's not about America is not a great country because that's what they're being told. And that is just outright disgusting because, and I'll tell you, I keep thinking about somewhere I would like to build a little house where I could one day retire. And I have this conversation with my friends, and some of them are quite intelligent, and a lot of Europeans come here and they're very patriotic. A lot of Mexicans come here and they're very patriotic. A lot of Cubans come here. Eastern Europeans live in America and they are very patriotic. Because when it really boils down to it, yes, America have problems, and Lord knows we are working our way into more of them instead of digging ourselves out of them. And the whole debt concept of borrowing money instead of actually earning it is a big part of that. There's the entitlement that we want. I deserve because I breathe. It's like, no. You go plow the field, go harvest, go get you. What have you done for your country lately? And I think that's one of the things is when you take the American flags down of schools, European schools don't have the intervention countries' flags in their classrooms as they should have. The Danish government some years ago, one of the right-wing party, Nationalist party, let's call it that, she tried to put up a Danish flag in the hall in the hall of government in the equivalent of the Senate, and there was a big outcry about it. She tried to put up a Danish flag in the Danish government building. Oh, well, how dare you? So if you are being told constantly to hate your country, to hate what your parents and grandparents fought for, to rewrite your history, and that's the problem we have with history, is it's constantly being rewritten to a self-defamation, to the point where you don't love America because there's nothing to love. But what it really boils down to is when you really sit down, and if you have been in other countries, if you have seen how other people live, if you have seen the lack of freedoms and government oversight in the European Union now, as has been for many, many decades, any country where the IRS has its own SWAT team is scary. But it really boils down to America, with all the problems we have, we're still the best place to be because we can still do things here that you can't do anywhere else. I can still build my crazy Harley with a long fork, and I can roll it down the street with loud pipes. I can't do that in just about most European countries. I can still defend and protect my home and my house with my firearm and have a fairly decent chance, depending on what state I am, that I won't go to jail by shooting somebody who's breaking into my house trying to kill me. There's a lot of things I can decide tomorrow. I want to start a business tomorrow. I'm going to start building, Kermit the Frog Patriot dolls. You can do things in this country you just can't do anywhere else. It's becoming harder because that whole big government, with big government comes entitlement and comes handouts, and you don't have to think for yourself. And you can say the education system is to blame for where America is today. European has a great education system, but it also comes with the same ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very scary that we are breeding out the critical thought and questioning process. And people are just believing that they'll vote because of the 10-second soundbite, because of the little streamer. And if enough media tells them one thing, they will not question it because, well, it takes time. I have 3 children. I got to go to work. My husband works. People have lives. So if we had honest media, we had honest information, it was adhered to a standard of truth. So people could turn on the TV and actually believe what they saw because it'd been properly, independently fact-checked. It had to be true. If the FCC actually did their job, they should start shutting down all of these outlets that are living and existing on propaganda. I mean, I don't even think CNN is officially labeled as a news outlet anymore. I think they're labeled
Entertainment.
as entertainment, right? So you can't take your news from there. Where do you get your news from? Now you really have to start digging. And if you have 3 jobs and 2 kids, you don't have time to do that. You can just hope maybe you can catch a podcast on the way home, and then you'll still most of the time get one side or the other side. So people that just decide, well, heck, I'm either going to ignore it, I'm just going to just believe the last thing I heard because it's easier. Because nothing, if you start looking at what's going on in this country, looking at the problems that are coming, and they are rather large, if you look at the direction of, I'm going to call it the civilized world, I'm sure that might be offensive. If you see what's coming down the pike heading at us, it's not good. And we're going to have some trouble coming. And it's going to take a significant effort to really re-rail this country or Europe or the world into a common sense way of governing ourselves that's not going to destroy everything we need to live. That's going to take effort. It's going to take hard work. And it's going to be a shock to some people. And I think the governments are pushing this realization that, I mean, I talked to my German friends and said, well, the Green Parties of Germany, incidentally, the part of the German government today, from what I understand, is the government with the least graduation record from college ever. I just think that's an interesting tidbit of information. And they can't take offense because they know that, did you graduate college? Oh, yes, no. But the direction they have taken the country will cost them for the next 50 years and the next many generations to rebuild. And again, if you are governing your country out of emotions and ideology and things that are not necessarily factual or practical, well, you are going to run over a cliff one day, and the cliff is coming. And that just at this point, we could just all individually start planning for how we are going to individually, ourselves and our family and our friends, deal with the cliff, because I don't know if the government is actually capable anymore.
I'm not sure if the government isn't guiding us off that cliff. I mean, yeah, I won't go down like the crazy, the crazy side roads. But I mean, if you do look at, as I kind of consider it, like I call it neo-globalist socialism, whatever. If you look at that, I mean, if they have their latest, their kind of the new communist manifesto is there in Georgia, the Georgia Guidestones, they've kind of stated what they want to do. And if you look at, I think it was great, how like Elon Musk, I'm not saying I'm not a fan. I don't know who the guy is really, but I thought the tweet he put out was really hilarious, because you can even see within the elite, you can see trouble brewing, where he tweeted the picture of the naked guy emoticon and Bill Gates, and I thought, Elon Musk is not my hero. It's not that, but I thought to myself, this has got some kind of meaning. There's just something going on here. There's trouble within the elite levels, because that to me seemed like, it just seemed like, I like seeing that. Well, something that I also like when you were speaking, it reminded me that something I'm seeing right now. You talk about us going off a cliff and the Western governments. What I'm seeing now is ideology above all is what I'm seeing. And many people get confused. They think that it's about the money. I hear that a lot. And I'm like, they've already got more money than they'll ever need, because it's not just it's your, you can consider it like your oligarchs, the corporate,
Yeah.
world, the government, etc. They don't need more money. They don't need
No.
it, but they want you to think they do. And so,
Yeah.
and it really is about, I think it's about power. It's about who they serve. People say that they're dumb. They're
Yeah.
not dumb. They serve their masters very well. And then, yeah, ideology above all. And you see it. I mean, I think, who has not known at this point somebody whose business went under or watched businesses go
Yeah.
under because of ideology? Like, we have
Yeah.
restaurants here like, for a perfect example, there's restaurants here in the Phoenix area that are going under, or they already went under, because they were like, no, we're going to avert you with our, I mean, whether you believe in masks or not, they were like, we don't have to wear them here in Arizona. It's kind of a forgotten thing at the moment. But they're like, no, ideology above all. This is like this is a statement of my ideology. You have to have, a vaccine passport and a mask to get in my restaurant. Well, the restaurant goes under. And the
Yes.
owner is sitting there watching it happen,
Yeah.
and they're bankrupting themselves because ideology above everything else, even going bankrupt,
But so's the country. What do we have?
Yes.
$30 trillion in debt. We have
Yeah.
more debt than we're ever going to repay. And see, that's the problem. And that is the check that will eventually come. That's the same thing as if you're in college, you don't have a job, but you have a credit card and you have an enormous college debt, and you get your degree in transgender Austrian harmonica repair. You know what? You're not going to be able to pay your $500,000 debt. You're not going to be able to pay your credit card because you keep spending money on stupid things, and eventually you will go bankrupt. And we will, on either side, this is not even about this party, that party, the Muppets in Washington, they no longer care about the money they borrow. Obviously, they don't. There's no fiscal responsibility or sound practices. What are we going to do? We're going to start a raffle. We're going to start collecting, have little people on the street corners collecting dimes so we can pay off our national debt. They don't care. And so at some point in time, we're going to end up defaulting, which at this point in time it seems that we have one cliff to one side, one cliff to the other side, and depending who's officially in charge, we're speeding towards one of those, while there's a very little bit of a bunch of people in the middle trying to keep us from falling off that cliff. But we're still weaving behind the two. And sooner or later, I keep thinking, well, you know what? Maybe let's just go off that cliff. Let it happen. It's going to happen sooner or later. Let's just go off. Let the crisis come. Because then when we really hit rock bottom, then we can start rebuilding. And we are going to, when everything goes tango uniform, we're going to have to start rebuilding out of self-preservation, out of common sense. Because, all right, so, I keep reminding me of people that I knew that built a house in Malibu, where we had the brush fires and the mudslides. And a friend of mine, they built the house fell down, one brush fire, mudslide. All right, they built this house up the same place. A couple of years later, house fell down again. Third time, they built another house. And third time, the house fell down. And then finally, they built somewhere else on sturdy ground.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, you know what? Like people keep rebuilding in Tornado Alley and having their house destroyed. I know you like where you are. It's comfortable. You have a nice view. But maybe if the ground keeps shifting, you should build somewhere else where you're actually, sturdy ground, built on rock, some build up from the bottom again. And I guess we're going to have to build. We're going to have to hit rock bottom before you start rebuilding a sound country. And I guess maybe we need to have to go back to the Constitution and do that.
It might require nationalism. I don't know.
It's like, can we just call it? I mean, let's call it patriotism. I mean, what is the difference between patriotism and nationalism in the bigger scheme? I mean, you can be patriotic and love other countries, I believe.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be you better. You are not better than anybody else. Our country is not better. Well, I'm going to say America is not better than everybody else, because I don't want to be the ugly American that keeps throwing that in everybody's faces, because I don't think that's the right way to do. Every country is great. Just some countries you have more opportunities because of the way they're governed.
Yeah. You could kind of say that, some countries people are fleeing from, some countries people are fleeing to. That's a good
Yes.
way to put it.
And maybe we should start addressing that by taking the countries that everybody's fleeing from and help them where they are rebuild their nations or fix their problems. And I'm not saying we need to do any more of this old nation building and intervention and color revolutions, because Lord knows we're not really very good at it. I know, and hi CIA, you doing? Miss you. Call me. I'm still waiting for the CIA to send me some of the FOIA documents I've been requesting since I was, I don't know, 10. But I send them flowers and ask them out for weekends, and I think the CIA and we could make it work. We could have a romantic weekend and share information if they wanted to. But they're not really very good at this whole revolution thing anymore. They're not really good at the art of spycraft. Just like we don't have politicians who are very good at the art of statecraft anymore. We don't have the great statesmen. We don't have the operators, because a lot of the operators in the agencies and the military and the intelligence community, they left during some decade ago, a couple of decades ago, when the way they did things that had always worked were no longer popular with that time's administration. And if you get rid of all the people who make things actually work, just like I keep thinking about the jets, the Polish jets to Ukraine. Why on earth was that ever in the news, in the media, on the front page? It should never have been. It should just have been done. And okay, I'm going to grant it, it's not really that easy, because we're looking at planes that have been upgraded to Western avionics, Polish language packs. So you send them to Ukrainian pilots. They have to relearn how to fly those. It's not that easy. But it was just a thing that shouldn't. You don't do that. Back in the Cold War, you supported the side you supported. You didn't put it on the newspaper every time you tried to do something. You just did it. And why didn't the Ukrainians have a better air force built up before this? Why didn't we support them over the past year?
And how many billions have already been? I mean, it isn't like there has not been aid to that to the Ukraine as it is. So I mean, they could have a bit more of a military than they do.
I mean, they're doing really well considering what everybody thought, and they're very. But this also shows that if somebody's determined to protect their nation, their country, their borders, and they see their families being bombed and killed, that really, really will motivate someone to pick up a fight. And if you have your back against the wall, which is one of the things that we're now seeing in a political realm in the West, where political or argumentative, you put people with the back against the wall and enough of them, then sooner or later they have no recourse left but to fight.
Yeah,
and fight for what they believe in, because you destroy their businesses, you destroy everything they have, their ideology, their way of life, their country. You take away the foundation for the family, for the country, for law and order, for common sense. You erode all that. You put people's back against the walls, and they're going to fight back. And that's one of those things that, when that happens, I don't think that's going to be as courteous and as friendly as some might think. And shock is coming, I think.
I think so, yeah. And I'd be curious to, like you mentioned, that we definitely have some hard times ahead. I'd be curious what you, even on a high level, what you might think those are going to be exactly. But one thing, I'll share the screen for just a second. I think this is something that an article I read this morning that I thought was really powerful on Zero Hedge. It's just, how much are we prepared to sacrifice to help the U.S. win a propaganda war against Putin? Now, that's the headline. But if in reading it, one of the things that I found is that the real point of it is that in the information war, like in the propaganda war, we're starting to see, like in the Ukrainian situation, where I feel like a lot of the EU countries, their backs are against the wall. Kind of like you're speaking, like I think here in this country, yes, we do have our backs against the wall. And I want to revisit that real quick too. But I think the EU is, because if you think about it, Germany especially is being asked to lose in this conflict. and India is being asked to lose in this conflict. Like, for instance, Germany won't be a manufacturing nation any longer if they stop importing the Russian oil. But then they're going to be the bad guys. They're going to win the great globalist woke. They're going to lose the great globalist woke favor. You're a nationalist. You're not part of the gang. So you've got the collective West, you could say America, saying Russia, saying Germany, we want to sanction and destroy. We want to win this conflict with Russia. So we want you to end your manufacturing. And you're supposed to be green anyway. Just stop using petroleum. It's like we're asking them to do ridiculous things. And is their back against the wall? Are they going to do that? And it's kind of like India. I mean, they have good relationships with Russia, and they need to trade with Russia. They need fertilizer and seeds from Russia. They need to trade with Russia. It's a big population. Famine can happen very, very quickly. And so we're sending diplomats to India saying, you need to get on board with our campaign against Russia. And the Indian government, for the most part, is saying, we need Russia more than you. Yeah. And you're telling us to have famine, or you sanction us and we have famine. Well, long game, just F off right now. We'll just take the hit because we're going to take it anyway. We're going to take the long game hit that's better for us. So it's kind of like now this whole winning and losing against I'll call it like the neo-globalist socialist agenda. It really has exploded on an international stage right now, and Ukraine is where the center of that proxy war is happening. But I think we're kind of already in a World War III scenario, really.
But we have been for quite a while, because the problem is we are. Oh, it's twofold. We can start by saying the European Union has. Yes, they have a problem. We have a bigger problem because we have more crazy people at the helm that are going faster, heading towards the cliff. The European, and I'll give that to them, the European politicians are smarter than the American politicians, in the sense that with the whole construct of the EU, you will wake up one morning in Europe and realize that your vacuum cleaner is now no longer allowed. You woke up some years ago, found out that the cucumbers that you were trying to sell are not allowed to be sold because they're not straight enough according to EU regulations. I am not kidding. This is what happens. I can't buy the brake light I used to buy in this garage in Denmark because some muppet in Brussels have decided that it's no longer up to spec, which will destroy a whole lot of little local economies and businesses. But they're smart about it. The European Union politicians, most of the European Union guys, they're not elected. They just sit in Brussels and pass laws that nobody really knows anything about. They don't signal it. They don't put it on the newspaper. They don't have big debates about it. Whatever type of big government control, globalism they want, they're just doing it. But they've been doing it ever since 1955. And they've been doing it very nice and slowly and gradually and discreetly. So that when I talk to Europeans, they don't really understand that they don't have the freedoms we have here, because they have become so conditioned and so used to the way things are. Oh, no, we can't do this. Oh, no, we can't do that. Oh, my God, no, that's not allowed. That they haven't even noticed that it's only when you then go here and go, no, we can do whatever we want. And if the government says you can't do that, well, guess what? I'm going to do it anyway, because just because you say so, I still have my own freedom. I still have my own personal freedom. Now, yes, we're being monitored and watched, and everything we say and talk about is being recorded and all that. We know that. We also know we're not going to have to break the laws. This is not about law and order. This is about a bigger thing. This is about, do I need a piece of paper to open a business, or how many offices do I need to get to get this done? Europe is incredibly bureaucratic. It's complicated to do things now, and it is expensive because the taxes are incredibly high, and especially the tax on any kind of fossil fuel. And then at the same time, the demand of all this green energy nonsense, which all implies that anybody who is a nationalist or a patriot or on the right hates the planet, who wants to pollute it all and have cow flatulence destroy the planet, and we want to drive our pickup trucks, and which is asinine. I mean, I don't think that anybody on the right wants to pollute the world and poison the water and any of that either. But I think we don't have to make it into an ideology. But this needs to all this needs to happen. We'll get to half of the world with electric cars. We'll get to all this when the infrastructure bears it, when the market bears it, when the consumer bears it, when the products are actually good enough to be worth buying. All this will happen gradually. Here, any muppet in Washington who has a bad idea will be given TV time to scream and shout this insane idea he or she has, and we are going to do this tomorrow, which will lead to the backlash. We'll go like, oh no, you're not. You're going to do this, which is what we said. Well, if certain people get in office, you'll see all these stupid things happen. Why? Because they said that's what they're going to do. Because that's actually what they believe in. Where you see the European, even the extreme socialist left or the Green parties, well, they'll put it nicer. They'll make it sound like they're doing something nice for granddad, even if they're slashing her pension or taking her car or turning off her light. They'll make it look nicer because they're more polished. Here, they won't do that. They'll just telegraph exactly what idiot thing they're going to do, and they'll do it on a world stage because of the way the media works now, which means that America is slowly diminishing its value. We are not, and let's not forget, under Obama, America lost one drop in its credit rating. That got smoothed over really nicely. But when certain people overspend and are in office, the economy suffers, personal business suffers, everything just goes further down. Military, law enforcement. I mean, it's very simple. If you have people in office who doesn't support law enforcement or the enforcement of law or borders, well, how do you think that's going to bode for your country? No matter how you wrap and twist and turn it and color it and paint little rosy flowers on it, it's not good for your country if you have people who doesn't believe in the sovereignty of the country, who doesn't believe that this country is worth fighting for, who doesn't believe the rule of law in this country or that country or any other country. That's just not going to work. And that's why a lot of people are starting to slowly push away from America, because we really have become these, and don't get me wrong, the Europeans have really bad ideas when it comes to certain things. And let's just see, how much trouble do we want to get into?
Oh, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
I was surprised when years ago I found out that in kindergartens in Denmark, 1 week of the year, all the boys have to dress up like girls and all the girls have to dress up like boys. This is Denmark. And I thought, are you kidding me? Why? I'm pretty sure the kids will figure out what their own sexuality is eventually. As they get, kids and sexuality is not something that belongs in the same sentence. I wrote books for women on how to stay safe. I wrote books on and talked a lot about sexual abuse of children and sex trafficking, and it infuriates me because when you talk about the sexuality of 5-6-year-old, there should be no such thing. They will figure out what they are when they're home, start telling them what they are, and whatever that is, that's what we support them in being. But this whole other thing is complete asinine, and 90% of the population of this world knows that. Unfortunately, those are not the 90% that anybody on the media wants to talk to or talk about. And that's what the problem is you have in Europe, is you have very little recourse because the people on the other side are not really allowed to be heard, because then they are being painted and labeled as extremist, rightists. They're a bunch of Nazis because they don't want their little Joey to go to school wearing a dress, which is, we have all these arguments now that are so unreal. They're not arguments we should be having. These are not the problems we really should be looking at. They're all a distraction from what we really should be looking at. But nobody really, that's complicated, because now if we were to present the problems to the population of America or Europe, we would start talking about problems we couldn't solve right away, or we couldn't solve without angering some of the greener vegetarian of the species. Yeah. And with all respect to my green vegetarian friends, there's just certain things you cannot do. You cannot shut down all the energy from one day to the next. There's never going to be a thing as net zero. It is complete asinine. But we have so much cleaner cars. So over the evolution of time, over the past industrial age, everything has become cleaner. Of course, it has. And you can't say that, well, the developing countries, they don't have to adhere to these rules because they're still learning. But we have to destroy our economies, which is built on fossil fuels. I mean, can you buy your tennis shoes without drilling for oil? No. You have nothing without certain fossil fuels. Will we gradually, in a balance of time, get out of that? Yes, we will. And it is happening automatically. The cars are not nearly as polluting now as they was 50 years ago. It happens automatically, but it happens because of demand and because of economy. If you destroy your economy and eventually everything will shut down, well, like I heard somebody was talking about, well, what about the global impact of the war of Ukraine? Well, I don't think the Ukrainians are really worried about the burning of rubber of Russian tanks that were shelling their country. I really don't think they give a damn right now that, well, if we blow up this Russian tank here, it's going to pollute. It's going to pollute some. There's also a realism. There's a realism that seems to be missing from certain people in charge of the Western world that you don't see in the Middle East or in Africa or India or what you would call developing nations. I don't even know if that's correct anymore. You have a common sense there because they're more pragmatic. Things have to work. We have to eat. And when you talk about the Ukrainian thing, will lead to famine, and this will lead to dead people and more crisis and more migration, and that's another problem. Oh, you're absolutely correct. It pollutes more, and it's a couple of years ago. Electric cars are not cleaner. They're not the solution. It pollutes more to build a hybrid than an S-Class because the Germans are still somewhat efficient. Oh, gee, I'm sorry. All right, Crystal, it's all about you. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we're battling is, I guess, the nationalists are battling for, I guess I'll define myself as a nationalist. Okay, it's too late. So the thing is it's the fake moral argument. So I was when I lived in Washington State, I was very involved in pro Second Amendment politics because Washington State is kind of a very, very red state with a really big blue spot called Seattle that that has complete political control over the state.
Yeah.
And they are like full on, we support Josh Schwab and his little henchman Harari. If it's a bad idea, we insist on it, so basically that's where that state's going. And it's very, very unfortunate because you have 1/16 of the state, as far as land mass, but that's where the population is. So it just steamrolls the rest of a very, very beautiful, proud state. And I found that in fighting to have the Second Amendment not look like it does in New York or Illinois, there in Washington, the real battle, it's always the same. We can look at it as far as the green politics or the what is it, the climate stuff. Second Amendment doesn't really matter. All these political wedge issues are always obscured, and it's always reduced down to a fake moral argument. And that is one of the hardest things to fight. It really, really is difficult because, if I could get in a cage match with a fake moral argument, I would do it if there could be a fair fight. But it is really, really hard because when somebody says, if you won't eat crickets, you're a Nazi. If you if you don't believe that the population of the U.S. should be forcibly disarmed, I mean, SWAT every house. You believe in killing children. If guns exist, it's like, and you're like, if you own a car, if you don't own a Tesla, then you are, you're a Nazi. Basically, if you don't own a Tesla, you're a Nazi. I mean,
pretty much.
Yeah, and so you're in this situation where you're fighting a fake moral argument. And the problem is the entire argument, the fact that you've entered into it, now you're stuck. Because in a sense, when somebody says that, well, if there were no guns, no one could be shot, therefore you're wrong and you're a Nazi. If you believe in if you believe in actually ultimately the sovereignty to defend yourself. I mean, the Second Amendment was originally castle doctrine in 1536 in Europe. The idea was the king said, if I can defend my castle, you have the right to defend your person and your home. Mainly because they were going to haul him out and cut his head off because there was so much violence. And if you defended yourself, you had defended yourself and killed property of the king. So it's like we have these like foundations of, I would just call it Western civilization. You have the right to exist. Your life is valuable to you. You can defend it if someone's trying to take it. And they tell you that if you believe that, you are an absolute horrible person that wants to kill children, wants them killed. You're responsible for all bad things that happen, and you're a Nazi. And you know what? If we just come and swat you and kill you, it's a better world. And so how do you fight that? The fake moral argument is, I am to this day, I'm trying to figure, how do you really fight that?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, despite the fact that they are continuously breeding a new generation of like we talk about the insane argument, like I saw, everybody's a racist, everybody's a Nazi, everybody's a homophobe. My gay friends are apparently homophobic because they don't think that their kids should wear dresses if they're boys. I saw a statement from one of these that said, well, hard work is considered racist. You cannot argue with this because it is
yeah.
Oh, gee, okay. We are. They are defeating themselves with their own hive mind. I was just looking at it like the hive mentality. They're defeating themselves, and it doesn't seem that. For those watching around the world, I don't want to make this an American-only argument, but we have a midterms coming up that I have a whole lot of faith in elections anywhere, because you get to choose from the two people that they want you to choose from, which doesn't really do any good. It doesn't matter where you are. You don't get the best leader in office anywhere. You don't get the best guy, man or woman, in office. You get one of the ones that have been able to pay this price or had enough money or enough of the establishment backers to get into the office. For the system to be torn down, the people who are benefiting from the system have to unite and get rid of it, like term limits. Who's going to fight for term limits? We said if we have people in office who doesn't remember who they are and believe the Easter Bunny is real. Sorry, kids, the Easter Bunny is real. Just don't worry about it. Yes, Mr. President, the Easter Bunny is a real thing. You know, we have people that are so old they have no idea where they are. They should probably be out of office, at least somewhat. Term limits. Of course, we need term limits. That was the whole idea of the Constitution. You need people, workers, doctors, industrialists, blacksmiths, come in, serve their country for a couple of 2 tours or 2 terms. Same thing. Politics is war, right? So 2 tours in Washington, and then you go home. Like the Roman general that defeated Hannibal. You show up, you fight for your country, and then you go back home to your farm. We shouldn't have a political career class because they have no idea of what's going on in the country. It's the argument of how much is a gallon of milk. Most politicians in Washington have no idea. But who's going to be the one to push through term limits? They're all benefiting from this, and they're insider trading, and there's special rules and special regulations. Same thing the EU. The ruling class, they get stuff that you don't get, including the benefit of insider trading and the ability to take bribes in order to change policies. Which is a real thing. We have an exceptional corrupt bunch of people who are running things, but they're never held to account because the ones who are to held them account are themselves, and they're not going to do so because they make money on doing what they're doing. But the arguments that are now coming to light is self-defeating. You would think that with the midterms coming up, for instance, I'm a person who never speaks politics, but you asked, so you're stuck.
Yeah.
With a midterm coming up, you would think that there would be some people in the governing party that would dial back rhetoric that is counterintuitive and does not make common sense. I always said, if it doesn't make common sense, we're back to the argument, even for those of you who are in high school or college, who believes in what your socialist teacher who never had a job will tell you, then go back to the basics. If you lift a refrigerator up the stairs, you may hurt yourself. Yes, no, common sense. Fire is hot. Yes, no, common sense. If you work hard, you earn money, you can buy stuff you want. Common sense. You have to go back to common sense. If we have enough in common to make sense. And now we have the real argument is, do we have enough in common to actually unite as a country and say we can fix this? Or in Europe, are there now so many people who believe in the opposite of common sense that we don't have anything in common? Because then I guess we need to start talking about secession. We need to start talking about countries breaking up in here's a left country and a right country, which may be a real thing, which may also be one thing that there's a globalist push to do, because America is still standing in the way. We are, like you said, a whole bunch of armed Muppets who's ready to defend our nation's borders and our homes and our families. Because Lord knows, with all respect for law enforcement, they're not going to make it most of the time. They're just not. And that's why one of the reasons why the argument for gun control, it is over. The argument for gun control is a mute subject. It will never happen. Guns have been part of American culture forever. And at this point, there are so many guns in America that to start taking them from law-abiding citizens, but not from the criminals, which never seems to be an initiative on any political ballot, well, then it doesn't matter anymore. You can't. Like we have all the 80% guns that's been built. We have millions of guns that are not even registered. It's just not going to happen. We may as well just arm everyone so everyone knows everyone else is armed and we can defend ourselves. The end. And yes, I'm doing this with a little bit of levity because not everybody should have a gun. Maybe we should have a mental health check for people who have firearms. The same thing, we maybe need a mental health check for who's in office. Are these people actually sound? Can they count? Do we teach our kids in school how to be fiscally responsible in college? Do we teach them how to the credit card purchases versus banks? Do we teach them that? I don't think we do teach civics anymore. So we need to bring classes back and start teaching the young how to actually be responsible with their money, that they actually have to earn, which is another shocker. Because sooner or later, the government's not going to give you any money because they're going to run out. And we're back to the inflation. The more money we borrow, the more inflation we have, because it's so many common sense things, but you don't know it's common sense if no one told you. And the media's not going to tell you, and if your teacher's not going to tell you, well, then you have to go back and rely on common sense. So do we have enough of that?
Yeah, and along with teaching like fiscal responsibility, I think also there's to really get back to the nationalist ideal of American exceptionalism, or truly, you could just say like the individual's exceptionalism, because not only being taught to be fiscally responsible, but I think one thing that is missing, and this is what allows a lot of the neo-globalist socialist agenda to take root in this country, is that people don't believe in themselves. You know, there's this hopelessness of, well, I can't anyway, it has to be given to me, or it's been taken from me, I never had a chance. So in a sense, we're the schools, you could say, and the culture has been, or some of the culture has been, breeding a nation of victims who just, it's beyond, fiscal responsibility is good, but you also have to believe that you can do something, that you can create something, that you have that ability, and that belief, it's as if that stool has been kicked out from underneath young people, and they're just like, well, here's the thing, not the millennial generation, but after the millennial generation, I think it's the Z generation, whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah, so the people younger than millennials, we're getting kind of old at this point, Some millennials have like hip replacements and stuff now, so they're getting old, right? But the younger generation than the millennials, like their kids, basically, one of the things that we're seeing now is this trend, if you may have seen it, is they're wearing pajamas all the time. Pajamas are now in style. And there's a lot of psychologists that have looked at that, and they're like, it's because they don't even want to bother getting out of bed because there's no world for them.
Yeah.
And you start thinking, man, that's a shame, because that is strictly a mentality. America, you can still do it. If you want to be a millionaire, you can do it. You can. It's a matter of will. If you want it, you can achieve it. there's nothing you can't do here. That's a real shame. Is that
Yeah.
To be taught fiscal responsibility is great, but gosh, one of the core of it is to believe in yourself and know you really can do anything you want.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because as opposed to Europe, and especially Germany, who is so authoritarian that if the government says something, that is what must happen. This is what we will do because the government says so. For the past 2 years, and I'm quite proud to tell you, I have not changed any part of my life. In fact, I have traveled more and filmed more in the past 2 years than I have done in the many years before. I still went to the gym every day, still went for a walk on the beach every day, still went to tinker with my Harleys, still had my friends over for dinner once a week. We never changed any part of our daily routine, except when I had to, chase somebody in a Prius down and steal their toilet paper. But that's a different story.
You're a nationalist.
I'll fight for my right to have toilet paper, damn it. And my buddy, my German friend, he was over and he just talked to his parents. And for Christmas last year, where there's a moratorium in Germany, you're not allowed to visit each other. You can't do anything. You can't have friends over. There can only be one car in the driveway, literally. And because it's not like Germany has a history of reporting on their neighbors, but they would report on their neighbors. A year and a half ago, when I was out visiting a friend, he said, "Yeah, but could you please park down the street, because if the neighbors see there's a car here, they might call the police." And that is like you saw in New York, tell on your neighbors. How is that solidifying a country? But my friend, he told for Christmas, he told his parents, "Oh, he's going over to Tino over to my place for dinner," and his parents were utterly aghast at this. Like, but how's that possible? You're not allowed to gather. And he was like, "Well, I get in my car and drive over there, and all the other guys are driving. They put their cars and they drive over there, and then we have dinner." But they couldn't understand, how is that possible? Because it was said that you're not allowed to. But here we are, a bunch of consenting adults. I know we're in London, we'd be doing cake gate on this one, but a bunch of consenting adults with enough common sense to know, you know what, we'll be okay. I'll be okay walking on the beach without a mask. It's okay. I'll be fine. I had COVID. Fine. I was sick for a few days. And honestly, afterwards, my immune system has never been better. I had no flu this year. But anyway, that's not here or there. But to all these poor millennials and all these poor kids sitting at home, being afraid, being depressed, we can't do this, we can't. And I feel really sad for some people when I see them walking on the beach with a face shield and double masked on the beach in the wind. And like, anything about aerosol and it's like, initially you'll kind of laugh because, come on, you're out here, the wind is blowing. Do you know anything about aerosol contagion? That's not how it works. I see people sitting with 100 yards on each side of them with a mask sunbathing. And I really feel bad for them because they're genuinely afraid. Mm-hmm. And it's not like people haven't gotten sick and died. It's a real thing. It's not that. But at some point in time, you have to have enough within yourself to go like, you know what? I'm not going to live this way. I'm not going to do this. This does not make sense to me. Mm-hmm. Sitting alone in your car with a mask. I mean, it's just common sense. Come on. Who is going to infect you? It's just, you have to, even as a young person, you have to start asking the questions. Start looking up the statistics of who actually died with or how. Look up. Actually, I really encourage that you look up the statistics, especially who's getting sick with the third jab and all that. I'm not going to tell you what the numbers are. I've seen the numbers from the British health officials, from the New York health officials. The numbers of who's actually getting sick and how is terrifying. But you have to have, if you have peer pressure, if you're being told, if you're being scared to death, if you have all this put on you, and that's one problem we have, because we'll have 20-30% on the right and 20-30% on the left, and they will only follow the left or right side and ideology at any given moment. They will never look at what the other side is saying. They will never consider the other side might be wrong. So, and since we never have an honest argument in the middle, we'll never reach those people with common sense and pull them back in off the ledge. And that's why we have all these young people who are afraid and depressed. Suicides for this have gone up tremendously.
Hmm.
And that is scary. I believe in Britain there are more suicides than COVID deaths. That's terrifying. So is the cure worse than? But again, that's a whole different argument. We're back to: do you have a self center? If everybody gets a trophy, you don't know if you have the medal to win a competition. Do you have the medal to try? I don't care if I win or lose a competition. I'm going to give it my best, and if I lose, I'm probably going to fight a little harder for the next one. And I think that is the competitive spirit that you start. That was one of the first things that you took out of the young people when you started to give everybody gets a trophy, everybody's fine, you don't have winners and losers, and all this horse shit. Because of course you do. Competition is an integral part of human beings. And when you start taking parts of things away from human beings, that is part of human nature. Now you are destroying the psyche of people. And that is what you're really seeing. And that's why so many young people have problems, because they are being told that is something is normal that is alien to basic human nature. So you're trying to rewrite human nature. And that doesn't work genetically. And that's where a lot of the problems are coming from. That's why you have all these young people with problems, because they don't have that common sense granddad. And lo and behold, if granddad was voted for Trump and they wouldn't let him see their grandkids, which is, are you actually telling me that you're going to let politics get in the way of your family? Which is even more asinine. But that is what the communists did. The ones in the watchtowers, when the communists starved the Ukrainians to death in 32 and 33, when there's a great induced famine in the Ukraine, because the Soviets took out all the grain and killed all the farmers and relocated many. When you had the parents and the grandparents were out picking what little crops there were to send them to Stalin, the ones watching them were the indoctrinated grandchildren. The children were in the young ones, 14, 15, 16, 18, were the ones who've been through the political indoctrination in the watchtowers with the guns, watching that their parents didn't steal what they need to eat. And that's how communism works. Okay, you have the Hitler Youth as well. National Socialism too. It has socialism in the title. That's a problem. And you can't have, and social programs is not necessarily socialism. We can still, and why in the hell are we not doing something to help the homeless people on the streets of America? A lot of these people have psychological and drug problems. They're not going to be able to help themselves. There are shelters that will only take them when they are clean of drugs and alcohol, which is why they're homeless. Why are we not helping them? Some of them are women, some of the children, some of them are veterans. There are Americans on the street that gets no help because and in California, we can't force help on them. If they're crazy, yelling at things, throwing things, and have mental problems, we cannot pick them up the street and take them into a facility where they get detoxed and get psychological counseling. We're not allowed to do that. We can't help people. And it seems to be working in somebody's benefits that somebody seems to not give a damn. But you can talk about it. You can do the value signaling. You can do once at every Thanksgiving, you could go down as a rich celebrity and you could feed the homeless, whether you can make turkeys. I've been there. And you go, well, what a bunch of hypocrites. What are you doing the other 364 days of the year? Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, you have all these millionaires in Hollywood. Why are you not building homeless shelters? You really say you care. Well, then they do something about it. And they don't. They don't do. It's all about signaling. But as long as they have enough of theirs. But let's get back to how do we fix our country for the next generation, because they're going to wake up and have to take their pajamas off and put on work clothes and go to work, because there will be a time when the economy crashes, when everything goes down, and gasoline is $10 and you can't afford to bring food to the stores. Well, then all those city kids are going to wake up and realize it's going to be a real hard world when they're going to have to sell themselves for a box of Pez so they can eat. And maybe they should rely on a little of the common sense of the farmers, hoping that Bill Gates will not buy up all the farms with Monsanto and screw up our nutrition even more. And maybe another thing is, you talk about dumbing down people through the education curriculum, through the massive information and what's it called, entertainment complex that'll keep you on edge all the time. The nutrition in food, the nutrition value of food has gone down by almost 90% in some cases. A carrot now is not the same as a carrot in 1930. There was nutrition in a carrot then, or a cucumber, or an apple, whatever you have. Now you have literally drained all the vegetables and the foods of nutrition, which is also something that plays with the mind because you don't get enough nutrients. Well, your mind's not going to work as well. And that's something else. Why are we not having a conversation about that? That's a hell of a lot more important. And if you want to talk about, you want to spend all this time talking about third gender bathrooms, guess what? We can fix it real simple. We call them bathrooms. Done. Okay, so what? Someone's going to have to give up on the urinals. Call them bathrooms. End of stories. Move on. We have bigger problems. We really, really do. Our nutrition is one. The raising of our children is one. The economy is one. The food source. Maybe, however, I'm not going to be doom and gloom because I could sit here and say the sky is falling, but maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of this. Just maybe the Ukrainian war will wake up some people to realize that, holy crap, a war can actually happen. A battle on the ground involving tanks can actually happen. Maybe we shouldn't take the tanks away from the Marine Corps so they can actually operate as an independent entity. Hello? Do you think? Of course. Maybe we should. We praising the Ukrainians for fighting for their borders. Maybe that minds of the people who could wake up and go, oh, maybe we should fight for ours. Maybe the Europeans should fight for theirs. You're going to raise now. Maybe you should need to raise the army again. Maybe you need to get more tanks that can run in Germany and Denmark, and maybe you shouldn't destroy the military completely because maybe we're going to need it. That means you're going to have to start recruiting a little bit. You're going to have to spend some more money on defense because bad things actually can happen. Wakey, wakey. So that if you do that, well, you're not going to raise people to go fight for an EU army. You're going to get people to sign up for a German army, or Danish army, Norwegian army. Well, in order to do that, well, they're going to start waving the flag, and I guess that's sort of almost borderline patriotic and nationalist, having your country's flag on your uniform. Dear Lord, where that's going to lead? Maybe something good's going to come of this. Maybe they're going to realize maybe we need to bring manufacturing back to this country as well as to Europe, so we're not dependent on the Chinese or on foreign players or on foreign oil. We were energy independent when it came to oil just a little over a year ago. Why this need not bother us if we had made sound fiscal decisions to actually protect our country? Because there are bad people out there. And you just have to face that fact. We are not, and here's the shocker, this is where they're going to lose everybody, we're not all the same. We are different individuals. Thank God for that. Men and women are not the same. You're going to get shut down for sure. But guess what? It's a good thing. Lord, I don't want to date anybody like me. I don't know why I want to date anybody like me. But thank God for that. Because we are all individuals. We're all based on our decisions from where we came from how we grew up, from outside stimuli when we were children. Different cultures grow up with different perspectives, different views. And that's what makes the world great, is that we are different people that have different ideas, bring different things to the tables. And that's a good thing. And we should embrace that. We should embrace that we are all individuals. We are not a group thing. We are not the hive. We are all different people who bring different things to a table, and we need to embrace everybody's different individual talents, capabilities, and vantage points, and make that to use for a better world. And that may be something that could come out of this, because sooner or later, the insanos running, especially this country, will have destroyed everything. So either we'll crash and burn, or somebody will realize we have to pull the handbrake before we get to the bottom. Either way, there's going to be a rebuilding process. It can only happen if you build it in fiscal common sense and proper logistics.
Yeah, I think that it could be a reawakening for many that their politicians don't have their best interests in mind, and also the extreme need to be in control of your country. So, but the thing you're mentioning, that would all kind of involve, like if we're to have a good military and then people be able to have self-determination and such, that's all going to, it sounds like something which is going to require nationalism, sovereignty, individualism. And that's the thing. That's a big step for a lot of the youngsters in pajamas right now. Like you said, they're gonna have to take off their pajamas,
Yes.
put on the Carhartts, and go out there. And that's going to be a big step. But I don't think it's that impossible at all. They just need the determination. Really, they just need to know that they can see that example. And really,
Yeah.
disaster might be the best way to get there. I mean,
Yes, because then they're going to have to. It doesn't matter
have
if
to.
they can or not. You're going to eat. You're going to have to go harvest food.
Yeah, and I think, and it might be a political awakening for people who've been really, I would just say, programmed to kind of be a collective gray blob that's helpless.
Yeah.
They're going to have to define yourself, chisel yourself out of the block,
Yeah.
because once we have that realization, that's going to be a big difference. It's going to be a big difference that if everything crashes and burns, well, who did it to us?
Yeah.
And eventually, once you hit the bottom, I would say that, like you were saying, we used to have energy independence. Well, why don't we now? What's the real reason? People are going to want to know when gas is $15 a barrel,
Yeah.
And the thing is that, sure, the propaganda machine can forever blame Putin. And I got to tell you, if that guy had the power that the mainstream media tries to tell you he does, it'd be a different world. I mean, it'd be very, very interesting. He's not all powerful. That's crazy. And people
We
actually
got
believe
3% of our oil from Russia. That
Yeah.
doesn't account for a doubling of the oil price that started before he invaded Ukraine. But again, that's a fact. Now we're looking at
Yes.
facts, and facts are scary to some people because it does not coincide with the worldview they have decided to adopt.
Especially when ideology is above all now, and that's the thing. So people would have to drop that too. They'd have to say, wait a second, I just can't have an ideology that is above common sense, above reality, above all, And
Yeah.
that's definitely very different. So yeah, the Ukrainian situation could cause a lot of this to change, because it might be hopefully it won't get any more violent. I actually could see it wrapping up in time. I think it's possible. I kind of have a feeling. Here's as Joseph Farrell would put it, kind of high octane speculation, to use his word. I could see that Russia's getting close to being done with what they wanted to do. Now we can debate about whether it's actually denazification, but definitely demilitarization. That's one thing I think is happening for sure. And so I think that Russia, Putin, can feel the heat of there being more and more pressure to militarily support Ukraine in ways that wouldn't be to their benefit soon. So I think they got to get it done. So I think the thing is, they're going to get it done, and then like the next day they're going to be gone. Everyone's going to be like, hey, where'd they go? They achieved what they wanted. I think there'll be some treaties. They'll probably take some of eastern Ukraine. I think that is all going to work out. And then the EU is going to be like, then you're going to see Zelensky, if he's still around, saying, hey, EU, aren't we buddies now? I could see Putin being that smart, because you go in, you demilitarize it, you pull out, and then you say, okay, we have the west, we have the east part here, west, you can have that western part. And then what's the EU going to do? Like, it's going to bankrupt the EU if they have to actually support rebuilding Ukraine. So I also do wonder sometimes if we're not looking at one thing where you're saying that this could come out to be a good thing. I think the plans for this could have been 70 years in the making. I mean, the BRIC nations are a new deal. And this comes we go down to the SWIFT currency. I think, the SWIFT system for the banks. You also look at, America has lost a lot of trust by freezing assets, because now nations go, well, wait a second. Basically, if we don't share your ideology, which is an ever-changing target, then you're going to freeze our assets. Well, F you. We'll just go with the BRIC nations. The sun is rising in the east, people. And so, yeah, I think that a lot of the youngsters in America, and of course a lot of the older people in America too, are going to wake up and go, what happened? And you know what? You got played by people who are masters at chess and were playing this for 70 years to screw you over. And you kind of had it coming.
Yes. I mean, you can talk about why do they know what they know? I mean, we have the Confucius Institutes in American colleges, where the Chinese are teaching communist ideology in our American colleges. I'm sorry, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty damn tantamount to treason. If you're teaching an anti-American sentiment in America and how to destroy the American system based on the Constitution, I don't know. That, to me, that doesn't really sit well. But again, it shows how radicalized our colleges are. well, I guess radicalized. That's a bad word because that's usually where good kids turn into bad kids because of what they've been told. But leave that as it may. I think the Ukrainian thing, I mean, first of all, it was entirely predictable that, and I'm not as some right wing pundits will then call it, the Putin wing of the Republican Party, which is what? Because it's not just the left that doesn't like you to ask questions. There are certain parts of the right that doesn't like to ask to make statements and make questions, and which is. We really need to get the people. We need to get the people in the middle, the ones with common sense. We need to get them rallied up and militarized. Oh, I gotta say that. I don't know what they would. I don't know if an army in the middle would be. I don't even know how you'd label that, but they'll probably be labeled Nazis. So
middle Nazis.
Yeah, Nazis too. So I mean, I don't think it was unpredictable that Putin did what he did. I think it was entirely. It's been predicted by military historians for the past decade that sooner or later he's going to do this. He's using the term "I'm going after Nazis" because he's had some great photo ops with some of the Ukrainian soldiers waving swastika flags around. You take a photo op, well, there it is. You get it served to you, you're going to use it. That he's going to denazify and militarize. What his war aims were, they probably changed a little bit. I think he had been lied to rather a lot by his military about their capabilities. There's a lot of corruption within his military. A lot of the money that he thought he may have spent on the military have apparently gone somewhere else, which is why, apparently, taking a page out of Stalin rising from the grave, 20 of the top military officials in Russia seem to have disappeared last week. And his head of the military defense minister died at 66 of a heart attack, or was it with a lump of uranium up his rectum? I'm not entirely sure, but dead he is. I think Putin, he thought this was going to be easy. I never thought he was going to take all of Ukraine. I thought it was going to be fairly fast, maybe take Kiev, put in a puppet regime, or at least take as much as the country as he could, and then have a buffer zone installed, which is why I think what they're looking now is the next big push. And wherever these lines are going to stop will be the target for some sort of a deal done. I sort of agree with that. But on the other hand, Russia is not adverse to casualties. And the young soldiers that are running around Ukraine getting killed right now are not the children of the Moscow elite or the Leningrad elite. It's not called Leningrad anymore. It's the St. Petersburg elite. They're not, the coffins are not coming home to Moscow. They're in Novosibirsk or somewhere else. Those are the kids that are dying, and nobody sees their bodies come home. So Russia's way of war has never been risk adverse, never been life adverse. They have no problem if they're going to lose 10,000 or 20 or 30,000, as long as Putin he can keep his hold on the country. The war will go on. They sat in Afghanistan for 10 years before they left, and I think they left predominantly because of Glasnost. I don't think they want to sit in the Ukraine for 10 years because it's not productive for anyone. Which is why I actually didn't think he was going to do this. I knew if we kept pushing the NATO line, sooner or later something was going to give. So of course our vice president goes to Poland the day before the invasion and says, "Yes, we welcome expedient Ukraine into NATO." Like, well done. That's this. It's just poke the bear. So sooner or later he did what he did for whatever, and I don't think entirely the reasons why he did what he did has come out yet, because like I said, you always look at 5 steps down the line, see who's going to benefit from this. And just because there's a conspiracy or something going on, just because something brought this on, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the current Muppets in charge that did it. There's a lot of different levels of government and intelligence, and the people who are really pulling the strings, just like what we started talking about, the Nazis, were the industrialists, were the business, were the bankers, was the money. So whoever comes out benefiting from this may have had a hand in causing it, whatever it is. And I know that sounds a little bit like a conspiracy, but you could look, World War I was, the Franco-Prussian War was prolonged because Krupp sold to everybody. The industrialists liked to have the war going on because they sold a whole lot of big guns and material. War makes money. Maybe it was a setup to kickstart the Cold War was during the Cold War, everybody made money. I'm just speculating. It's purely speculation on my part. But something like this, that could have been a mutual agreement. Again, speculation entirely. But if this kickstarts a new Cold War, everybody's going to make money from it, which is disgusting because the Ukrainians are dying because of whatever this scheme was. And I don't think it's entirely clear what we were doing in the Ukraine before, because Lord knows there's a lot of American politicians that seem to have had a lot of deep involvement in the Ukraine, more so than any other. I mean, if it was Switzerland, I would get it. If it was Amsterdam and the red light district, I'd get it. But why everybody all of a sudden have a financial interest in the Ukraine, despite that I don't really think we're doing enough to help the Ukrainians, because it sounds good for Biden to say, oh, we're going to send them $800 million worth of equipment. What, I mean, seriously, in military terms, $800 million of equipment is really not a lot. It really isn't. It's a little bit embarrassing considering that we sent Putin $43 billion in oil money since the war started. So sending the Ukrainians $800 million worth of stingers, come on, seriously, is that the best we can do?
So I think a lot of that gets blown up on the way from, you know, I mean, we never can be sure of our sources but I have been following it. I mean, I have a good number of sources that I'm following. And I think that when you mentioned it just being a way to make money, well, a lot of that equipment that we're sending, it just gets nuked. I mean, the first second it crosses the border, Russia just takes it out. So
or it goes somewhere else.
Or it goes in the black market. And that's happening. I think we can, I would say, allegedly, but I would say I have a good deal. I'm very certain that there are arms dealers waiting for it that are reselling.
That is from people on the ground from various special forces that I can't share with you here on the air. That is exactly what I'm hearing. That there's a lot of arms dealers running around, and I've seen.
How will that affect Europe?
And
to come? Yeah.
But okay, it's war. People make money. Again, we're back to war. People make money during a war on all sides, and you know, it's there's not always integrity going on in that part of the world. So, all right, fine. That's one thing I would like to look at. I would like to follow the equipment, see how it goes, and I put in my paperwork to the Ukrainian military. Not community, what they go, the military department. For my official press credentials. I have press credentials, so I can travel. I have my press card, and I wanted to go to the Ukraine as an independent reporter and report on some of these stories, talk to the Russian prisoners of war, and look at how this battle actually unfolded and what's actually going wrong from a perspective of modern warfare. Because I don't understand, the Ukrainians are talking about they're missing the capability of doing counter battery fire, which is something, Lord knows, has been going on ever since the 1870s. Are they lacking artillery? Are they okay, they can't fight back with the planes or rockets. I don't understand exactly why this is a thing they don't have, which should be the common. And I think this is one of the things that may make up a lot of Western militaries, because, like we always say, during the wartime, the first year, we lose a whole lot of people because we forgot the book we wrote during the last war. And I think we have all these military men and top leaders in America and Germany and who have completely forgotten that a conventional war with a twist of modern technology, how does that look on the battlefield? We are very good at combined arms, but there are things that we have lost. And it's like, well, the Russians have 3,000, 4,000 tanks, maybe more. The entire British army, from what I heard, have 400 tanks.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you can lose in a land war in a few days in Europe if we get to that. Well, they're expensive. Well, maybe you should build them cheaper. Maybe we should build. We always made fun of the Russia during the American or the Western style of technology. Even the German. We always made fun of the Germans because they only had a handful of Tiger tanks. But they were exceptionally technological. They're exceptionally advanced. They're really good at what they did, but they didn't have enough of them. But the Russians would swamp them with their 40,000 T-34s. And that's always been the same here. Like, I still don't understand why on earth do we have the Abrams tank? Why does that not run on diesel? Why does it run on aviation fuel? I mean, why do we have all these super advanced technologies in the field? Like I keep hearing Sean Hannity talk about, oh, the next war will be fought only by drones. We'll never have boots on the ground. And like, you guys got to wake up to the reality that war is going to be fought by soldiers on the ground with a rifle in hand. And the least technological piece of equipment that will not break or run out of battery. While we are building $1 million of single weapon systems that are incredibly advanced, stupidly expensive, takes a lot of training, and relatively little to take down. And then it's off the battlefield. We have the $1 million drones. Holy hell. And those self-propelled tanks. Well, what about an EMP burst? Well, then they're all grounded. They talk about all this electronics, while you're sort of forgetting the basic skill set of warfare, of fighting with a rifle in hand and a compass and a map, and where's the enemy. And like the Russians, they have a big problem with communications because we're jamming their comms. And it was interesting because yesterday we had a drill yesterday with the guard, and we're trying to have a Zoom call with our northern component, and I kept breaking down, had a problem. I said, communication. We can barely, because of all this modern technology that we're relying on, you take that to the battlefield and we're going to run into a problem. Just look at what happened in Afghanistan. You have people who are motivated, but low tech capabilities, they still kill a whole bunch of our soldiers. And if we have very little but high tech in a battlefield like today, it won't take that long to get rid to take it out. And then we have nothing. We need I don't want to say we need larger standing armies like the Germans. They have some 400 Leopards, but only 100 of them are operable, and they don't even have enough people to operate the rest if they had to. And again, if the Russians have 3,000 tanks, I can't remember, it's 3,000 or 4,000, something to that effect, where probably half of them are operable. If they were going to invade Europe, they would probably ensure they all would be operable before they started such a thing. And the Germans would counter with a couple of hundred. It just boils down to a numbers game. And if we forget the numbers, we spend the same amount of money. We outspend them, everybody. But what we're spending the money on, is it going to make us win wars on the battlefield? And I have a very good lieutenant colonel friend of mine who always says, every time there's some new idiot initiative coming out of the Pentagon or from Washington, that now we have to do this, or we have to this training, or that silly thing, or we have to teach our male recruits how to iron the dresses and whatever. The question he always asks is, does this make us win wars? How readily, more or not? It's the military. The only thing we need to care about is, will this initiative make us win a war faster, better, quicker, with less casualties? And that seems to be the one thing we forgot.
People forget people forget the primal nature of fighting. Like, I was in the military, and it will actually upset people that I know in the military. Definitely upsets their parents when you say that, your primary role in the military, regardless of what your rate is it's mass murder.
Yes,
that's what you do. It's what you're there for, and it gets primal. It's your M16. It's a club. It's a mortar. It's a shoulder fired rocket. I mean, it's your bayonet. I mean, it's dirty. The real reality of it is very, very dirty. And I don't think a lot of people these days would even join if they knew that. Well, sure, maybe you control a thing, a drone, but when it comes down to it, your real job is your bayonet and hand-to-hand fighting. It's mass murder.
I mean, war is dirty, and it's not going to be run by drones. You can't search a house with a drone. You can't occupy land by a drone. I mean, it's not where the reality of war is. We have a lot of evolutions in the war, but you can't do stuff from a container in Arizona.
No, and that's what's happening there in Ukraine right now. Is you've got the old school World War II era fighting. You've got the submachine guns. Not quite a. It'd be kind of cool if Azov had MP40s. But maybe they do. But
they probably do.
Probably do. Probably got a couple. So your submachine guns. Building by building. That's really that's the gritty. fundamental nature of it. And yeah, your drone's flying around out there, but it doesn't matter much. And then eventually someone's going to figure out where those drones are being flown from. It's not really a safe place to be. And also, low tech always beats high tech. So yeah, I mean, low tech can cause you so many troubles. And the thing is low tech evolves along with high tech. So as you have your high tech, low tech will evolve to take it out. And like the F-35 is a neat machine. You know, you see him fly around the fighter. But the thing, I read an article, and I forget where it was from. I believe it was true, you know, but where the MiGs, the old school MiGs, were being retrofitted to land on crappy runways.
Yes, that's the Russian way of war.
And I'm like, see that you can keep your F-35. I want a MiG that can land on a field, because I was a CB in the military and we had to make runways, you know.
Yes.
We were always making runways. And the thing is that our pretty jets, they need like a glass surface to land on, or they disintegrate.
Yes.
And so, but a MiG can land on so you're telling me a MiG can land where a C-130 can? Yeah, I'll take a bunch of those.
Yeah, and that was always the Russian way of doing things after World War II, and we haven't learned a damn thing from the German war, where the Germans had all this technological stuff, and they were spending money on these high tech things and gadgets, but in the reality, they were overrun by 4 times as many Russians of everything. That's the Russian way. It is sturdy. It is rough. I'm surprised the Russians didn't come up with a Warthog, because that is something that is one of the most sturdy, one of the best platforms we have. That everybody wants to try to get rid of, because the one thing that actually works, and it's sturdy and it's reliable. But yeah, if we actually were, hypothetically, one of the players, we get into a big land war with Russia and China. Do we have the capabilities to actually take the battle to them? Probably not. Could we beat them if they started running over the borders towards Europe? Yes, I believe we could. But at some point in time, our lines would be extended, and they would be entrenched with an AK-47 with the iron sights, and they would be in their backyards. And we'd have a bunch of soldiers coming over with digital compasses, GPSs, and little batteries in our scopes that'll run out of. I mean, we are so vulnerable when we stop forgetting how to fight. Actually, we had that on the briefing yesterday. Okay, we have a maneuver coming up. Radios. What happens when the radios goes down? Telephones. What happens when we have no receptions? Runner.
Yep.
Okay.
As a runner.
There's always going to be we have backups, redundancies, but have a plan for all electronics to fail. Of course. And the Russians I'm surprised the Russians actually forgot that part. And I'm sorry, the Gulf Wars, we learned a lot about, holy shit, we have all this high tech and there's getting sand in it, and we need to work a way around that. And I hope that this will be a wake-up call. Like the German Minister of Defense, she said when this started, I never thought there was going to be a war. You're the Minister of Defense. It's your damn job. I mean,
you're fired.
Did you keep your troops ready? Oh my God! There's like, can Germany respond? And she's like, no, we're not ready. We don't have anything. But fine, you should be fired, because when you messed up. Is your military capable of defending its borders, country, and taking the fight to the enemy? Yes or no? If it's no, you should be fired.
Mm-hmm.
That's very simple. I would like to. Can the police, when people come busting through my door, the criminals on the field, will the police come here to my house and save me in time? No, I know that. Do I not think that maybe we should, fix that? I do, but until then, I'll have to be able to defend myself. Do I think the military of our nation should be able to protect our borders? Yes, I do. Our country, our allies. What is NATO if we can't protect our allies? And they keep talking about we should impose a no-fly zone. No, we shouldn't. I hate to say that, and I hate to say that especially because I love my Ukrainian friends, and I can't wait to get back there if the Ukrainian military department will actually get me my papers, so I can get going. Because if you're a member of the armed forces in America or anywhere else, you can't just go to Ukraine, because you may actually get arrested for being perceived as a combatant. And there's a whole bunch of things on that. A lot of dudes in the military, well, the British here got court-martialed because they were still in, and they took leave and they went to fight the Ukraine. I'm going to bring a camera. But anyway, I hate to say it, for my Ukrainian friends, but no, we shouldn't have a no-fly zone because that would be NATO jets that would be getting in the way of Russian jets. And now we have the potential of a real war with Russia versus NATO. And that's, I'm sorry, this is one of those things where I say, well, I'm sorry, Ukraine, you should have worked more on your air defenses and your air force while you had the time, because you are not in NATO yet, and I'm not entirely sure Ukraine should be in NATO, because we need that buffer. We didn't like it 50 years ago when somebody parked a whole bunch of ICBMs off the Florida coast. That we really didn't like that. I don't think the Russians are going to like it if we move a bunch of ICBMs into the Ukraine right across the border. I mean, it's just fair. We moved in Poland. We have in the Baltics. The Russians are sort of looking at us everywhere. Maybe the Russians should join the NATO.
I think they wanted to. I think Putin, didn't he want to join NATO?
I thought it was in the 90s. I think it was before him. I think it was in the 90s. There was a few years when I was still active that I think it was the late 90s where there was some cross training with the Russians, which was interesting. And that was my memory. I assume it had changed, but back 20 years ago, whether it was the Russians or the Balts or the Polish, they had nothing. They got paid $50, $30 a month. They didn't have boots. They would steal all our stuff because they didn't have anything. And it was at the point whenever a new unit from the Baltics would show up, and I'm like, all right, stop. What do you guys need? I'm going to give it from you from the quartermaster, because don't steal our shit because we need it. Let us know what you guys need. And we would kid them out because there was no money for them. And if the Russian military is still running under the top heavy, everybody above rank of whatever major gets paid a lot, and they keep all the money, and they don't, that money doesn't trickle down, and the soldiers are not properly paid, then I could see why the Russian soldiers are not motivated today, as it seems to be the case. And I'm just saying that tentatively. You got to take care of your soldiers.
Yeah. Well,
so
looking at the big picture, so we did have the, in defining, what a Nazi was. I have this feeling and
banker.
So I kind of think the definition of a Nazi is a little bit elusive. Maybe the foundational Nazi was really more a member of the NSDAP back in the day. I think if you want to say what was a real Nazi, it was more somebody who existed between 1938 and 1942, because I think they were kind of over it after about that point. Then they also probably were members of the SS, and they believed in Heinrich Himmler's Germanic history, the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki. They were. I always think it's this somewhat kind of mythical creature, in the black uniform, that is kind of an historic memory, and it's hard to know to what extent they really existed and who they were, because even within those ranks there were different ideologies. There was no one great Nazi kind of like demigod that created that like spawned all the rest. And then they disappeared in 1944 supposedly after the war, but they didn't really go underground. They just kind of ducked, and now there still is that existence, some may say. But if we look at like Ukraine, I mean, when World War II broke out, after what Russia had done, what Stalin and Lenin had done to the Ukraine, it's understandable that the Ukrainians are saying, "Hey, if you're going east to kick ass, we'll join." And sometimes I think it's kind of unfair to consider those battalions, I believe, like those groups, really, that said that they were SS. Well, the SS christened them, but they were more just guys who wanted to go get some payback, And some were barbaric. They did things that were not good. Of course, they existed between like 43 and 45. Then they were gone pretty much, and that's where you can get into the whole Azov battalions and such, as supposedly remembering that history.
The enemy of my enemy is the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and by definition, if the Russians are coming, then we're fighting the Russians. Then by default, backwards in history, we would be friends of the Nazis.
And you look at like and there was, of course, we have the whole Maidan coup, of course. And the funny thing about the Maidan coup, which is like back in 2013, 2014, if one's not familiar with that, watch that documentary Ukraine on Fire. I'm not sure if
The one the CIA had nothing to do with whatsoever.
yeah, that one. Yeah. So you watch the whole Maiden crew, the whole F the EU, our little the funny thing is if you look at 2013, 2014, the Maiden coup, a lot of the people who were in power at the time are sort of in power again right now, which is somewhat coincidental, It's really unique, and some of them have laptops to take care of and things like that. So there's a lot of sticky stuff going on. I mean, and the thing is, there was the guy Bandera, who was a particularly nasty person back in the day, who I think World War II era, who was still kind of. Some people actually use the term, Bandera Nazis, who does seem to have sort of a presence. He's a symbolism that exists in the Azov, right sector, and other militias of that type that are ultimately have integrated into the Ukrainian military also. So it's but like you're saying, do they share some historic ideology that is anti-Semitic or that just wants to kill Russians? Because definitely the Nazis weren't too cool on Russians either. It's just that, who are they is a big question. That's one of the whole, definitely one of the things that I definitely want to talk about. It was just is that it's being said that they're denazifying, and some of these guys definitely, when they've been captured, they have some pretty startling tattoos. But you know what? I was 20 and a dumbass too, and I might have done the same thing if I was a Ukrainian in the Azov, and I might have thought I was a real badass with my, ruins. And I mean, hey, if I drove a tank right now and I was going into battle, I'd have my little shrine to Rommel. I'd be like. Hell yeah, and I'd be on Pervitin.
Of course. Even Schwarzkopf, he had books on Hitler and Rommel sitting behind him before the. You learn from the ones who did the best at whatever it is you're going to do, and two things that are interesting. What you said is one of them is yes, you know what? There's Nazis everywhere. Good old the people of the belief of the National Socialism, of the anti-Semitism, of everything that a party member would believe in the 1940s. Those are everywhere. Are they around the world in numbers that really can affect outcomes of anything? Probably not. Are there people who are leaning to the right or believe in patriotism to the point where they want to defend the borders and so on? There's a lot more of them. Are you a Nazi because you're right wing or you're patriotic? Not at all. But one thing that's interesting, so you see a lot of people that was in and out of power, and what I think if you want to define the national, so I always use the definition, even though it's not the right. That the national, so if we're going to talk about who was a Nazi, I would say, all right, the people who joined the party were the card-carrying National Socialists. Mm-hmm. They were probably a adherent of the Nazi National Socialist doctrine, which is not entirely true because a lot of people they joined because it was good for business.
Social status.
And a lot of people they joined because, well, you know what? You want to be on the winning club. You don't want to be a Democrat in Hollywood, a Republican in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Just a fun example. You want to be on the side of whoever's in charge of whatever the hell it is you're doing. If you were in Russia, you wanted to join the Communist Party under Stalin. You really don't want to be the guy without the party card if you can avoid it. That is just the way of human nature. I have a business, these guys in charge. All right, I'll be nice to them until the next guy's in charge. And I think that is if you say the Nazis before, during, and after, I think there's a group of people who are ruthless and dedicated and motivated and will always be in power or always be the ones pushing events, whoever is in charge. If the communists have taken over, and I think it's important, if the communists have taken over in Germany instead of the National Socialists, 80% of the same people who were dedicated Nazis would have been in the Communist Party, still in charge in the same positions. So for them, to then after the war flow to the top and be in charge in Adenauer's cabinet and affecting events is not strange, because there are just people who are born leaders, who have less scruples, who are political animals, who are financially astute, who are industrialists, who are bankers, who there are a group of people that will just push events, and then or the people will follow if you go all the way up that way. And those are the people. They were in charge. They were in Germany. They were a little bit in an influx between the wars. During World War One, a lot of the World War One crowd you see coming back as Hitler took power. They were the same people that came back in their positions. In between, now you have the left-right struggle. You have the socialists. You have the communists. You have a Germany in turmoil that didn't really have a place, but the rich were still fairly well off. And after the war, the same thing here. And a lot of the ones had then been tainted by war crimes. They'd been in the SS. They were now not welcome anywhere. They're labeled as war criminals. But a lot of them had a skill set that we could use. So a lot of those got hired by the SS. A lot of them got hired by the French Foreign Legion. A lot of SS men fought in Vietnam and the Vietnam War when the French were fighting there. So you had people with the skills set. Klaus Barbie worked for the CIA for a long time. A lot of these guys worked for the SS. And a lot of them, though, stayed at home. They became head of industrial, head of leaders. They came in business. They were smart people. And regardless of what their past was, they were still going to be in charge. And I think that is more telling than what they called themselves during the war. It's about people and what they did. Yes, there was the one thing that the Nazi Party did, or the National Socialist Party did, and the way Hitler governed was he made it possible for some really despicable people to have way more power than they should have had, especially power over other people. And if you, will you see how all those Ukrainian guards in the German camps, who were not happy, who were taking out their vengeance on the Russian prisoners there. There's a lot of revenge going on, and a lot of individual, like Yugoslavia, Serbia, the Ustasi, there's a lot of individual scores settled under the German umbrella, because the German occupation or member of the Nazi Party made it possible for them to be in a position where they could take revenge over others. There's a lot of scores settled, just like there's a lot of scores settled and a lot of them executed behind the shed after the war was over. There are very few good guys in any of this. There's a lot of bad guys, and there's a lot of bad guys that are not as bad as they've been told, but that's a whole different story. But I think it's important that the same people that were during the war, they continued after for a reason, because that's how and who they were. And I think there's a large part of us that embraced that and embraced that talent. People they always talk about, well, we got von Braun and we got these guys over here, and they were Nazi war criminals or not, or yes or no. And I'm like, well, yes, but now we had a Cold War. Now we have a bigger enemy. We defeated the National Socialist cause under the banner of Nazism. Should we not then take their talents and bring them to work for us? Because those are still the same people that you want, the key personnel. The ones who were intelligent, smart, they were building things, they were doing things. Some of the top, no, we're talking about some of the top of the SS. But you also, if you want to show a picture-perfect picture of a Nazi, I would say it would be one of the golden pheasants, not one of the black uniform. The black uniform, I think they stopped wearing in 1934. Certainly before the war, you'd never see any black uniforms after, unless parade. That's a different story. The party members, the Gauleiters, that wore the brown golden party uniform, those are the ones you really see exploiting the people, stealing money, enriching themselves, and running for the large part when the Russians finally got there in the time of reckoning. Those are the actual party, which is interesting.
Golden pheasants.
That's what their nickname were. And if I would pull up a picture of a stereotypical Nazi, that would be the one, because if you take the guys in the SS that joined because they believed in the cause, or because they believed that Russia was the bigger enemy, they were ardent anti-communists. Some of them were anti-Semitic, and some of them weren't. But one thing that bound them all together was they were anti-communist, which is why you had the whole European International Brigade, just like you see in Ukraine today, where people from all over Europe and all over the world are joining the Ukrainian International Brigade fighting the Russians, because the Russians were seen as the enemy. And there was a large part of that in Europe during the Second World War, where you had European or international SS brigades, where people from all over Europe, even England, signed up specifically to fight the Russians, to fight the communists, because that's what they saw as the greater threat. Of course, that's also what they've been told. Left-right struggle again. Many of them did not sign up because they were anti-Semitic, but because their hatred for the Russians. So so in that sense, you can say, yeah, I guess if that's how you define Nazi, as someone who are anti-communist, well, then there's a lot of Nazis around. If you define them by being anti-Semitic, not so many. But if they're nationalists who are anti-communists, if that is the definition of a Nazi, okay, then I guess we have quite a few.
Yeah, and that's a great definition, because I think that's what people really need at this time. That's like a lot of the gist that I wanted to get across. Is just that it can be a bit of an etherical topic, and it really is being used way too much these days. And like I say, definitely for the political left, anyone who does not agree with you is a Nazi. So that, and then of course, yes. Putin right now calling the Azov battalions in the right sector and the Ukrainian military itself, Nazis, and saying that they're denazifying. Well, if they simply are, believing in nationalism, like, well, we're the Ukraine, we have the right to exist, you're invading us, so we're going to fight you because, well, nationalism, then I guess they are Nazis. But I understand what people mean at a deeper level. And, the more you learn about of course, World War II history, and you learn about the Germans, I won't say Nazis, just the Germans, because they were all Nazis. The Germans. No. It is really complicated. You would have, if you were to interview everybody in the SS and everybody in the Wehrmacht and who were going into Russia at that time of World War II, they have different reasons.
Yes.
And there is no one reason. And I would say that if we want to start demonizing somebody who was fighting for nationalism, was fighting for the propaganda of their nation, well, that's all of human history.
Yes.
Being impressionable kids and getting turned to hamburger on a battlefield, that's been going on since the first club, so that's just the way it goes. But I think, of course, we can look at individuals, we can look at commands, we can definitely look at, like, I believe what was the order police or the SD that were following along behind,
yes,
and doing the mass murder of entire villages and such. Yeah, bad things happen, and we can hold them accountable and say that was wrong. But to say that ideology was in the minds of every German who was heading east at that time or west, no. For the most part, I think most were just doing what their nation said. There's an enemy, we got to go fight. And when you're young, you're like, yeah, that's why I do in the military. I wanted to fight. I was like, yeah, I want to run across the desert getting shot at and kill people because I'm 20. I need to go do it,
and they've also been told before the World War II broke out. They've been told for a decade or two,
yes,
who to hate and why. They've been told that. I mean, that was part. On one hand, you can say that anti-Semitism was part of the propaganda, but anti-Semitism existed long before Hitler was born.
Yes.
So that he jumped on it and capitalized and used it is one thing, but you also have to believe it. If people have been told for 10 years that the communists are the enemy, which was also part of the propaganda, and then you can come back and say, well, in 1945, when the Red Army finally set foot on German soil and raped and killed millions of women, well, were they then wrong? Were the enslavement of all those behind the Iron Curtain, was that not, well, Goebbels did warn them. You can't say that he was wrong because that's what they did. But I think that's the difference between, actually, that is another interesting definition. The difference between the Nazis, the National Socialists, or conservatives and socialists, let's go with that one, is that socialists are about groupthink. It is about us. It's about the group. It's about the hive. If you look at conservatives or nationalists or patriots, it's about the individual. the individual idea. Where in communism you fall in under the ideology, where the ideology is everything, and there's no room for individuals. There's no room for you. And I think that's what we're losing by all this name calling, which most of the time is coming from that direction, is to shut down a dialogue about ideas. We don't talk about ideas. We talk about the bigger picture, the ideological bigger pictures from one side, where they have both sides can be said sometimes to have good ideas. Why don't we meet in the middle and try to make the good ideas come true? Because it's more important to not work with the other side, to not work with each other, to not communicate or have a meaningful debate about individual ideas. It's all about constructs and concepts and adversity. We have to be divided. We have to be divided as a people. We have to disagree. We can't sit, just like Lincoln said, a house divided unto itself will not stand. And Lord knows they have been doing everything they can to divide us as a nation, as a people. In America, they're doing it to a lesser extent. In Europe, they're not making it so obvious, but it is happening there as well. And they're fueling the division between left and right, between communists and socialism, and nationalism and patriotism. It really is becoming lines that are drawn up way too hard, because the individuals are being lost. Like we talk about Elon Musk. All right, buy Twitter, make it all about free speech. I'm all in favor of that. But we cannot expect that a given billionaire, we're back to a handful of billionaires around the world, is running this world. It's not about what Schwab or some other muppet or Bill Gates says. We have to actually fix this. There's not going to be some Musk is not going to come in on a white horse and save us every single time. We cannot be bailed out by somebody else from the situation we're in. We actually have to step up and do it ourselves. And it's going to take hard work, and it's going to be painful. And there's probably going to be dead people on the street. And that I don't hope. That's what scares me the most, is the division is so, like we saw a few years ago with the riots, the division has become so passionate that there are two people in one country that hates each other for instigated reasons that are not even necessarily real. And then you say, well, where are the Nazis then? Now it's just a boogeyman tool to blame one side or the other side. But no one talks about the individual.
Yeah, the individual gets erased in the socialist ideology. And then you look at, one of the things that, I guess you could say the Nazis, but really it's more as in coming to power, political violence was a big part of that. Just go and bust up the other political rallies, just because intimidation. Yeah. And we have a modern, well, we have the brown shirts today. They're just wearing black and hoodies, so we literally, so that's the thing. We are like in 1938 right now, or 33 or somewhere in there. We're in the mid 1930s. 1984. Well, 1984 comes into play too. So it might be that we are politically, on the ground, maybe we're like in 1936, 33, 36, somewhere in there. We're there. I'm not sure who Ernst Röhm is, but we'll figure it out. The thing is that maybe it's that Harari guy that works for Klaus Schwab is Ernst Röhm. Although I have a lot more respect for Ernst Röhm. He was a badass. I mean, I do think so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Hitler got rid of Ernst Röhm because he was gay, because everybody knew that forever. That was no one really cared. It was just he started having too many ideas, and again there was a significant split in the party. There was just like that had started with Strasse already back in 27. There was one wanted to be more socialist, communist. One wanted to be more nationalist, and that's what the split actually was. And Röhm, he started talking about the second revolution, something that Hitler really didn't want to talk about, because he had his revolution. He was now in charge. We don't talk about any more revolutions now. Enough of this. That was the one mistake Goebbels he did in 27. He wrote about the second revolution until Hitler shut him down. I think on the second meeting. They didn't actually meet until 26, 27. but yeah, I think we are now governed by propaganda and not by information, and that is, I think if you want to blame who's in charge and who's doing the most damage, is usually the ones who will try to stifle the other side's right to have an open and free conversation.
Yeah, I think the fake moral argument is always done by the side that, in my opinion, is evil. It's not the good guys, you know.
Yeah,
And so, well, you mentioned 1984, us being at 1984, and that's something that I believe is true on a certain level, because I remember reading 1984 when I was like a teenager, and back when it was cards on a stone tablet back in the day. And I remember what got me about the book, man, I could only comprehend so much of it at the time. But the one thing that I did get out of the book that just struck me and has always stuck with me was that, and I think we're there now when you say 1984 in this, it's that
yeah,
we have a situation where people don't know history,
yeah,
don't care. Well, if we're talking about the Ukrainian situation being like the Ukraine being a proxy for a lot that's going on right now, where it's happening, they think history just started. It did not just start. And the thing is that I was afraid. It's freaked me out reading that book as a teenager, because I realized that their goal was to have a populace that whatever the news was, that was it. And whatever history was said that day was it. And they
yeah,
would not remember. So you could say, this is the enemy, this is the history, we must kill them. Tomorrow, these are our
yeah,
friends, you got to love them. The next day, you can go on to something else. Next day, we have to ration our
yeah,
water. The next day, and people literally had gotten to a point, and I think we're there now. This is the thing. This is one of the things where American exceptionalism changed from being truly great individuals, so, you
yeah,
know, sovereignty, to something different, laziness, really, too much bad GMO food and things like that. And
yeah,
now, whatever the mainstream media says, you see the great big CNN. Like if you go for a walk on the beach, well, if I go walk through the neighborhood in the evenings and I look in people's windows because I'm creepy, I guess. But they have their windows open and you can see their TVs, and you can see it's always CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whatever. And you realize that whatever they are told, that's it. I honestly
yeah.
God believe we're at a point where the story can drastically change and they won't even know that it did.
So that's the one thing that I also sort of keep an eye on the chat. The one question I always get, and the one frustrating thing, or the one thing that really frustrates people is the question: what can we do about it? What can I do about it? Because all this is happening on a level so high up and by such a small amount of people, and I wish there was more people. I wish there was more young people involved in this conversation who had been raised with the opposite side point of view, who would disagree. They usually can't hold much of an argument because their arguments usually don't hold a whole lot of water. But what we can do about this is, besides every chance we get, educate the young generation individually. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you don't have to stand up on a soapbox on the town square. How very British of me to suggest something like that. Although they did that in Boston too, didn't they? You don't have. We can't all run for office. We can't all be on TV. We can't all. Well, I'm not doing any of it, which is probably good for the rest of you that I'm not running for any office, because that would be terrible for everyone except my few people. We can't all sit in Congress. Yes, we can write our congressmen and women every time they do something stupid or they're up for a vote. We can certainly do that, but there's time for this. We also have to be realistic. We don't all have time to do all these things. So what you can do as an individual, you can't save the world, but you can make your own little corner of it a little better by talking to the people, especially the ones on the other side, without lecturing them, talking to them about where their ideology will take the country, what they believe in, why they believe what they believe in, and what you believe in and why you believe what you believe in. You can talk to the next generation. You can talk to your kids. You can teach them about history, real, give them real information to counter with. You can teach them to be strong individuals who will stand up to their teachers or the crowd or all their friends who haven't bothered reading a history book since they were born, by fueling them with information, and then let the chips fall where they may. If they get in trouble or get yelled at or get ostracized by people around them because those people don't want to actually hear what's real. And like that's one of the things that I do. I'm very careful when I do documentaries and I talk history that I don't intercede or intersect my own opinion, because my opinion when it comes to history is not important. What happened is important. And I'll be more than happy to any conversation with anybody who disagrees with my findings is one thing. But if you want to have a conversation about why you disagree with my opinions, that's fine. I believe what I believe in because of where I came from, where I grew up, what I have seen, and what I have studied. And that is all we really can do. Is you can take the propaganda on the media and you can shut it off. That is the most important thing you can do. Yes, you have to once a week keep an eye on what is going. Don't read the headlines. Just see if you can find a news site that'll just give you information on what happened, just so you're up to speed on what's going on. If you have kids, keep an eye on what the school boards are passing, what their curriculum they're teaching. Just keep yourself informed. But other than that, turn it off. You see all the commercials that now, even commercials have an agenda, because the commercials for the most part now perpetuating their worldview or the worldview they are wanting to project, which does not really portray the demographics. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. If somebody's watching a show on firearms and guns, and then interceded with the commercials for Biden gun control. I'm saying whoever placed that commercial really didn't analyze who the audience is. So they did, and they're trying to sort of influence.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. You have to shut it off. Stop watching the movies. Stop watching the TV shows. Don't worry about the commercials. Walk out, fast forward. Because it will just upset you and piss you off if you watch every headline every day. Because every 15 minutes, they make money for the more people who are watching this. So just don't buy into it. Propaganda has no effect if nobody watches. So just stop watching. I watch TV shows from the 80s and the 90s because, well, at least that's a little bit of, but it doesn't interfere with my with me today. There's no political joke in a TV show from the 90s that's really going to bother me today. But if I watch a TV show from the day or a movie, there's going to be all sorts of stimuli that is forcing you in a direction that you probably found counter to your nature. So just don't watch. Seriously, don't. Just walk away from it. There's more entertaining things. Go for a walk, go for a hike, go play ball with your kids, go get dirty, do something else, build a bike, build a Harley. Do something other than buy into this. Put entertainment that has nothing to do with pushing an ideology, but is just entertaining. You'll live longer and you'll live healthier. And when we get to elections, research. When you see and redo your research, and don't get upset at a headline. I don't care if it comes from the right or the left, because everybody does the 10-second propaganda bite that is designed to piss you off or get you riled up. And that's not physiologically good for you, to always be in a state of flux physically and mentally. It drains you. It ages you, makes your hair gray. There's much better things you can do with your time, and do something when you can do something. And until you can do something, don't worry about it. Worry about you and your family and your friends and your loved ones. Buy gold, buy bullets, buy food, stock up on toilet paper. Have what you need so you can weather the crisis and your friends can. And then just go with common sense. And if so you see something that really, really gets you, then dive into that. Because 90% of the time, the headline that will upset you, if you dive into it, you'll find out that it probably isn't at all either true or have anything to do with what you were told it was or what upset you. It's a trigger. It's basic marketing. That's why everything for sale is $5.99, $8.99, $9.99. Instead of rounding up to 10, because psychologically 10, oh, that's a big number. But $9.99, oh, that's cheap.
Oh yeah.
It's basic marketing and sales with a little psychology thrown in. So go read old books and do something.
Yes.
Just ignore it. Simply ignore it and do your thing. You be you and let them be them, because they will sink their own ship. Unfortunately, you might be on that ship, so have a life preserved.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, and truly, it's a great personal challenge is to be the example of what is good. Be the example of a life that brings life,
Yeah,
that is life enhancing, life giving to its community, because that mean, we all should be doing that, And so it's a good challenge. I mean, so I do believe that. I mean, you really teach by example. I don't want to sound too full of myself, but you you are going to teach. You're going to express who you are. And
yeah,
if you are good and of good character and strong, and you humbly work on being wiser, you try to gain wisdom, you try to gain strength, you try to be a good person, you try to be a life-giving part of your community, you know, and while you got your F-150 and you got like your gun rack and you got your like Second Amendment T-shirt and you get out of your truck to go to Home
yeah.
Depot, or you pull up in a Harley, the cricket eater in a Prius is going to see you and go, maybe I should change my ways because that guy looks happy.
And you know what? I have friends that are completely opposite my political belief, but we're still friends. We
Yes.
both know that if we talk politics, we wouldn't agree. So you know what we do? We don't talk politics. I mean, it's not that hard. You don't have to agree with your friends on everything, except vegetarians. Damn, I'm not gonna. I love to cook for people, but I'm not cooking vegan food. I'm just saying, just no.
Oh,
And Bill Gates and your grass burgers, stick him, sunshine. Okay, not gonna happen.
yeah. Elon
Uh,
Musk was right about you. Yeah.
and I have great friends that have turned vegetarians, but like I say, they're functioning vegetarians. They can actually function in everyday society, and they keep. And then there are those that will continuously send me things of why it's better to be a vegan and why it's healthier for you, and their dog is vegan and their goldfish is vegan, and they just drive you crazy. So on the other side, don't be that guy. You don't have to be on your beliefs and always push them on other people. Lead by example. Just be you and be healthy and be in balance with yourself. And since I'm about to lose my voice, I will end you with one sunshine story that
Sounds great.
I think I have no voice left. Um, One thing that happened to me last week, I told some of mine, but it's a story that I just love because it brought me a little bit of hope. Um, I got home from work in the afternoon, and I went in the complex I live. There's a pool and jacuzzi and all that. And I went down the hot tub, and there was a couple other guys. One of them he is a virologist, he's a doctor, and there's another guy, manly men. We're manly men. We're talking about man stuff, and we're talking about war because apparently that's what men always talk about is war. And there's a bunch of kids running around and playing, of course, and a bunch of the kids are in the jacuzzi, and a couple of them they're 4, 5, 6 years old, and this young boy, he's 5, 6 years old, and he's sitting in the jacuzzi over there. There's a big jacuzzi, and we're talking about war and Russia and tactics, and we're breaking down the world situation and the battlefield and talking about what's going to happen, and this little kid, I noticed he's like moving closer to us, and he's listening. His eyes are big, and he's listening to us talk. And I was talking about the logistics of ammunition and artillery, and the little kid, and he's like, maybe they just don't have enough ammunition to pull up with their artillery, and like, you're listening, all right, kid. Yeah, that could be. I won't ignore him. I'll give him a chance. And like, kept talking, and then you kind of like intersect a little word here and there, and like I couldn't figure out if he was annoying or. And then we talked about what the doctor asked me, what are the Russians going to do now? What's going to happen? I said, well, what I think they're going to do is they're going to have one last big push, maybe in the Donets. They're going to mass their forces, and they're going to push as far ahead they can, and that'll be the foundation for where negotiations are going to start. And the little kid, he looks up at me, and he is not 6 years old, and he looks up at me and says, oh, you mean like the Germans did in 1918? And I look at him and go like, holy shit, kid, you just said that? It's like, oh yeah, I know, like the last push in the France where they just, I'm like, holy fuck. And I was so impressed by this kid. Like, who told you that? And his mom comes over, apologetic. Oh, I'm sorry. He has a lot of opinions. Like, Mom, shut up. Your kid is smarter than you are. And I was talking to him like, so young man, so who ran that push? What happens? Like, because I knew it was Prince Ruprecht who led that fast push. And we talked about it. He knew. He knew. Wow. He knew this World War I history. He knew his World War II as well. And I was just, holy shit, there's actually hope for us all. Like, outstanding. So it's not like the knowledge is dying. But I'm just saying, all the other stoners I usually see in that pool, they would not carry this conversation. So, I'm saying there's still hope, a little bit, maybe.
Oh, there certainly is. Wow. Well, I will link in the show notes to all of Tino's stuff. He puts out a lot of content, so it will all be linked there, and you definitely should check it out if you don't already. It is NASCAR time, so as Crystal says, so it's time to go watch some coal being burnt there on the racetrack and talk shit and drink beer, and well, it's time. So we got to go.
I'm at work, so I'm just going to catch up on all the old episodes of the X-Files. So
just as good, actually. X-Files. X-Files are back when TV shows were great. I think it might be the last great thing that was ever done. And Gina, Scully only got hotter, didn't she? Damn, by the third season.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking about that. She was. Yeah.
She was kind of frumpy when it first started, but I'm telling you, by the third season,
I thought she lost too much weight for the new episode 10 years later. I thought she got a little skinny there. The company looks the damn same. But anyway, that's a completely different conversation. But yes.
Okay. Well, so definitely check out Tino's content. There's so much of it. Lost Battlefields is amazing. Don't forget to check out his stuff on the forts because they are stone, steel, and cement. That is some of the best stuff too. And definitely get back to us on what you think of Scully. Is she hot or not? What season was her finest? Take care.
This is what we're now degenerated to. We're back to being manly men, talking about war and women.
Yeah, well, make war and women great again. That's
make women great again. Is that penised women, or are we talking about women only without a penis? Because I guess we have to qualify that now.
Old school women. Old school women.
What was it that they wrote about?
Nationalist women.
Caitlyn generally wrote about her and her penis, and I've never heard the terminology "her penis" before. This is where even the degree in psychology I have will not cover my own thought process going on there.
That's because it's nationalist psychology. Oh well. Okay. Well, we'll leave it on that one. Take care. It's been great talking to you. I think we put out something really good. I'll send you links later.
Thanks. You have fun.
I will. Bye.